Greetings, welcome. Come on in, welcome. All is a blessing. All is a blessing. All is a blessing. In Jerry, welcome, come on in. Greetings. Come on in. Tell a friend, tell a family member, tell a friend of me. Come on. All is a blessing. Come on in. Welcome. Greetings.
Come back home to Africa, the planet care and golden rain. I'm waiting for you once again. Coming back, I'm longing for my memory. Coming back to you. Out of bondage, now I am free. Come back home to Africa. You're calling your name. Come back home to Africa. The planet care and golden rain. I'm waiting for you once again. Coming back to you. I'm longing for my memory. Coming back to you.
Thank you. Thank you kindly, and Jerry. Thank you kindly. Greetings, Keona, beloved. Welcome. I'm shy. Just come on in. Peace be unto you as well. You and yours. Welcome, Keisha Smith. Neophyte, Bokur, tourist. Come on in. Welcome. Come on in. Kiana Metlock. Greetings and salutations. Come on in. Welcome. Welcome to this sacred space, this squared circle of gods and goddesses at high noon U.S. Central Standard Time here on both Blog Talk Radio, Steam Yard, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn in some occasions, Periscope. Come on in, welcome, come on in, greetings, come on in, all is a blessing. Come back home to Africa. Come back home. Come back home to Africa. Come back home. Thank you kindly. All is a blessing. Greetings. I will be forward momentarily. All is a blessing. Greetings and salutations. Welcome. Come on in. Welcome. Alafia, divine, all blessed, peace and love. Paleo, Uhuru Waku, Jambo, Habaragani, Kedu. Divine, all blessed, greetings and salutations. You are now sitting live with the Divine Prince, and always in archive at your leisure and convenience here on both Blog Talk Radio, but also anywhere I can be found in social media. Presently, you can probably find a link or an archive back to this show. And of course, you can visit me at youtube.com/ /V like Victor, OO, D like David, OOTYE. All is truly and indeed a blessing if you can just see beyond the veils, for it is all just an illusion and a test and one of the greatest divine mysteries of this life cycle. This is indeed my constant prayer, my mantra, affirmation, reverberation, reiteration, and it is my ever-living reality. It is crucial to the very foundation of my understanding, my being, my walk, my works along this divine, all blessed life path and journey. And it is how I, Divine Prince, make sense out of all that we're challenged with here in our daily existence on Mother, Father, Earth. It is my personal place of power and understanding, the place from where I begin, the place from where I realize and crystallize all my endeavors, understanding that I and I alone create and co-create my divine destiny, and I alone create and co-create my divine, all blessed reality. And so it is. Ashe, Asheo, Ashe. I greet you and welcome you in divine, all blessed peace and protection, safety, if you will, on this Monday, April 27, 2020. I am vibrating now with you and for you live, verbally, virtually, cosmically, quantum universally from this working temple of the house of the Divine Prince. Thai Potions, Hoodoo Central LLC, in this beloved, legendary, most beautiful, historic, and enchanted city in America, New Orleans, Louisiana, the land of my ancestors and those who came before me along this Hoodoo Obeah life path and journey, passing down the great Obeah stick along with the knowledge of the life-giving herbs, roots, plants, rituals, spirits, traditions. All is truly indeed a blessing. I am grateful for your continuance to join me here and be a part of this squared circle of gods and goddesses, this sacred space that we create at high noon U.S. Central Standard Time on multitude of platforms, on a multitude of platforms. I'm now on too many platforms to recite that out every time I do the show. So please do read the text that accompanies my videos, that's on my websites, that's in my social media streams, so that you can indeed be alerted and be aware of upcoming broadcasts, as well as an opportunity to listen at your leisure and convenience in archive. Of course, on blogtalkradio.com. That's our audio archive at blogtalkradio.com/the-divine-prince. And of course, you can visit my YouTube at youtube.com/voodoo Thai. All is truly and indeed a blessing. I often say, I try to say at least once a day, that spiritual power, people ask, why do we do this? People ask, what's the point? People ask, what do I do with this information? And so I remind you that indeed true power, real power, spiritual power and knowledge lies in its efficacy. That is its ability to produce reliable, tangible results here and now in this moment in time space, not in the here and after, not on the other side, not in the by and by, but result-oriented spirituality and religion for a modern time in which we live and exist in today. I live for, as I'm sure many of you do, the day when there won't be an opportunity to talk about Corona. There won't be an opportunity to think about the virus and how it is changing and reshaping the world that we exist in today. So I would be no less than a minister, no less than a spiritualist, no less than a root doctor and a conjure man and a hoodoo practitioner if I didn't say, stay at home, stay at home. Now, on the one hand, you say you don't trust these people, you don't trust the information, you don't trust the media, you don't trust the propaganda. But at the same time, now y'all want to get back to business as usual, just like your president. Now you want to get back to business as usual, just like those very talking heads, those very public figures that you say you have no relationship to. Now understand that people can remove themselves from a religion, from a particular cultural, indoctrinated way of seeing and viewing things. But it takes work. It takes work to reprogram the mind, to take the religiosity out of an individual. And I see a lot of religiosity amongst otherwise would-be communities that see themselves as being a little bit more on the radical end of things, being a little bit more on the free thinking end of things. And so stay home. Stay home. Let's be clear. Let's be clear. I don't just listen to the media. I don't just listen to what is being said in America. I'm all over the world, virtually, every day, every day. And there's no reason you can't be also. There are news publications, news outlets, social media websites, and social media sites that we never mention in the list of Instagram, IG, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, et cetera, et cetera. So my knowledge is well informed, and I'm paying attention to the trends. Now let's look at the math. How can it be that a country like Spain or Italy, for instance, where this got started before us, if we believe what's been said, and they're now trying to determine, long after we do, whether they're going to open up again or not, whether they're going back to regular business or not. How much regular business has China returned to? So my mom likes to say all the time, one of the greatest gifts that God will give us is wisdom. Is wisdom. That's one of the greatest gifts that we have. So that if we can't be practical, logical, rational, realistic, then we can't then rely on our own understanding. Sometimes our understanding is diluted, polluted, influenced, in the worst case scenario, manipulated, you know. And so we've got to be clear in order to say that we are free thinking. We've got to be neutral in order to say that we're free thinking. And we've got to be willing to be open to information that does not necessarily jive with what you think is the reality or the truth about particularly these subject matters that most of us are not even qualified to touch. Germology, infectious diseases, many of us aren't even qualified to touch economics. But let's keep it real. You're doing all you can to manage your budget and your money and keep your lights on and keep your life rolling forward and invest in your children in the next generation. But somehow we all super talking heads. We're all experts, just like CNN, just like MSNBC, just like the sports channels. I love to see brothers get together, at a barbershop or wherever and dispute sports when we own no teams, have no investment in any teams, have no connection to any teams, have no real influence over any teams. And so we play sport and game. Now that's part of the propaganda. Give the populace that which they need to keep themselves entertained, to keep themselves distracted, in the worst case scenario, to voluntarily pollute themselves so that indeed we can move them on out of the way. They're not even going to vote. They're not even going to participate in the process. They're not even going to be relevant. This is what's being thought. So if you haven't figured it out already, and this ain't racial, this ain't prejudicial, but if you haven't figured it out already, whatever you think the news is, this virus don't like black people. This virus don't like black people. And not just old black people. It's not just people over 60, over 50, with these extremely complicated health issues, it's a lot of you that are teens, 20s, 30s that have complicated health issues, that have the diabetes, that have high blood pressure, that have asthma. The numbers of rates of asthma just blew up during the decade of the 1980s and even into the 1990s, and particularly in communities of color. So don't be no fool now. Don't be no fool now. Greetings, neophyte, Bokur tourists, and everyone who I may have acknowledged or did not acknowledge directly. Greetings, Arisha. Hola, beloved. Thank you so much for returning, Seven the Gentleman, and being a part of our audience. And always show due respect to Keona Carter. She's our moderator. She's not being aggressive. She's not, being controlling. She's helping us to control and keep order in the chat room and make sure that I don't miss your important questions, comments, and requests. Let's see. I hope this is the first question, Neophyte Bokur Tourist. What is the one way you have been able to get through to Black people, African Americans, to bring them back to the ancestors? Wow, that's interesting, because what you asked is, what is the one way that I have been able to do so? And I'm going to speak directly to that. But before I do, often it's not me. You hear me say, you don't choose voodoo, voodoo chooses you. You don't choose Ifa, Ifa chooses you. You don't choose a particular spirit path because it's favorable to you. The spirit path chooses you that's most favorable to you getting your work done. Your work, but also your work that affects the rest of us, nationally, internationally, globally, universally, galactically, cosmically, if you will. So the one way that I have been able to get through to Black people about ancestors is through paying attention to what's being said. You often hear me reference back to Pop TV. You often hear me reference back to social media. You often hear me reference back to Yahoo 360, really being the first active footprint of me, being online, other than just having a simple email address. Yahoo 360 was the first social media network that I participated in, shared in, posted in. First, like many people, stuff that I wanted to post, stuff that was happening to me personally, post Hurricane Katrina. And then I found through that interaction that people were interested in who I was and what I did and what voodoo really was and what voodoo culture really looked like from the inside out in terms of New Orleans. So I would say I've probably gotten through best through rational, practical, documentable, reinforceable information. I've got friends, I've got frenemies, I've even got haters. And when I compile that information objectively, because I pay attention to what haters have to say objectively. Now, if it's ego and foolishness, it goes right over me. But if there's anything worth dissecting from it, even if they don't know they're giving me something worth dissecting from it, I pay attention to that. So I've tweaked sort of my style to some degree over the years. Viewers, participants who've been with me since the beginnings of Blog Talk Radio might notice the nuances in my style. I think originally I was a little bit more meditative, tranquil. Some of the affirmations that you all enjoy today, once upon a time, were almost the first entire hour of my show was that. And there were people who absolutely came for that. But then I had others who came for the politics, neophyte Bokur, who came for the debate of interaction, who came for the Tavis Smiley. I'm trying to think of some of the old heads. Tavis, there's another one who wears the glasses, old school PBS Black scholar, historian, show host. that would talk about anything Black, anything cultural, anything that affected us. And of course, that would then become world information. So there's a time, particularly in Yahoo, as Yahoo 360 dissolved, and we started figuring out where we were going to relocate. We all got into Facebook, and in Facebook, Tony, Val, and I both really started posting the history along with the documents, not just the debate, which was real common then, and to some degree it's real common today. We've just taken debating and conversation to a whole nother level, just like hip hop has evolved to a whole nother level. So I decided I was not going to do what everyone else was doing, because if everyone is shouting, if everyone is debating, if everyone is in combat, no one is listening, no one is truly teaching in that environment. I would look at the various show hosts who were combative, and there was no real teaching going on. There was no real information being shared, because you're constantly in a position of offense and defense in a warlike mode. So through that Facebook activity, my numbers grew in Facebook. People started stealing our posts, copying and resharing our posts. Then it became a place where people wouldn't even give credit for where they found the information or the origins of the information. And so I started bringing a great deal more of that to Blog Talk Radio. I wasn't doing YouTube at the time. It was primarily Blog Talk Radio. And I found that there was a core audience that was going to stick with me based on the facts. It didn't matter what their religion was, what their spiritual belief system was, based on the facts. And if I can get them to see things, understand things, which is why I float in between sort of direct language, quantum metaphysical language, sometimes mathematical language, sometimes astrology, sometimes I speak in Orisha, because I'm trying to continue to reach that core audience. And it's not that I don't care about those who come and go, because there are those who come and go at different degrees of that. There are those who have come and gone over the years. You may have heard me mention this before, who are shapeshifters, who recreate themselves. They come as one thing, one path, one religion, one tradition. They disappear. They come back, and they're completely something else. And so I don't try and influence what they do. Then you have others who come and go because there's just so much on the buffet. There are just so many different voices out there. And so they're either being driven by what appears to be popular, what appears to be, most interesting, where the largest numbers of people, show up. And we know that that's often favored. That's often based on many other factors other than how much meat and material is in the show. Popularity, music. There was a time I played a great deal more music. And my core audience rebelled against that. They loved the music, they enjoyed the music, but they wanted the information. They wanted to stop wasting their money. They wanted to stop wasting their time. They wanted to prevent making a journey somewhere and investing time, money, and effort, and sweat and tear without having any real knowledge. I started looking at various forms of initiation, particularly as they're available to Black people, from affordability, from location, from other barriers like language or cultural barriers. Does it require a passport? And again, I found a hole in terms of the information, in terms of the knowledge that was available. And so I grew to understand that my greatest value is my intellectual property. My greatest value is my intellectual property. Because, you can copy my style, you can copy my looks. I've had people literally try to copy my words, but you can't copy my wisdom, my experience. You can't copy what's up here, and I'm still struggling to get it out from up here and into a book format that I think is appropriate for the time. I don't want to be just another copycat book. I don't want to be just another sensationalist book, where you focus in on some particular sensationalistic aspect of popular interest of the day. Marie Laveau, Ghost, other points of interest. And then an author will sort of form their book around that. I want this to be textbook-like while still being entertaining, while still sharing my story. So even within that idea, there are 4 books there, at least, maybe 5 or 6 books there, at least. So I'm still challenged in terms of, I work on one and stop, work on another and stop, work on another and stop, while at the same time feeling this pressing need to get something out there on the market that meets the need of today, without it being rushed, without it being gimmicky, without it sort of catering to the Orisha romance in a way that does not benefit those participating in the Orisha romance to evolve, to grow. So I've managed to do it through information, through knowledge, through documentable information that can be further explored, further researched. I am the son of a retired school teacher, and so I like to think that I've absorbed some academic style from my own experience, but also from that of my mother. And so my mother would make us, we couldn't ask my mom how you spell a word. Her immediate response would be sound it out, which was shorthand for there are several dictionaries in the house. So you would have to sound it out, you would have to break it down, you would have to understand the root of a word or a concept, and then apply that in terms of looking it up, in a dictionary, a thesaurus, an encyclopedia. We had several sets of encyclopedias, some of which I knew well, very well, page by page. So it is akin to who I am and sort of my style, but it's also been very successful for me in terms of maintaining, getting people to come. When I say my core audience, getting people to come, listen, participate in the show. And maybe there is something that they like and enjoy about the show. One moment, please. In that moment. Oh my God. All right. So, please forgive me for the interruption. So, yeah, I think I managed to get through to people through not just spirit, not just religion, not just history, but also through well-developed documentation that moves people, not just at the emotional level, which is how many of us were moved in terms of religion, but also at the intellectual level, at the consciousness level. Because sometimes people can sort of intellectually order things together, but then the application requires real spirit movement, real spirit involvement. Let's see. All is a blessing. Hoodoo occultism. All is a blessing. How does one know if voodoo has and is calling upon them to come forward? That's my same response, Kiona Carter, to the questions we get just recently, yesterday, about is voodoo speaking to me through my dreams? Is Orisha speaking to me through my dreams? And often when people say that, believe that, have sort of that connection to these traditions in that way, you're speaking code language to me for someone who's pulling from books, pulling from movies, pulling from social media, and what social media says Orisha is. We have an old saying here in the South: those who know don't say, or those who know don't tell, those who tell don't know. And it's sort of a figurative uh, uh, euphemism for the fact that people who are absolutely operating in the traditions don't violate the traditions in any way. And going back to the previous question, I think I can find a way of using common language, everyday language, practical language to make things make sense to people without violating protocols, without violating traditions, without violating what many people do spend a great deal of time, money, and effort to learn, to gain access to develop. So you only know that the calling is upon you through your feeling, through your emotion, but then you have to take it a step further. You have to investigate. I strongly suggest looking into accessing your background, your lineage, your heritage. We live in a Western culture that taught us to adapt other people's cultures, other people's traditions, other people's belief systems. And even though we live in a quote unquote Christian country, we at the same time say freedom of religion, freedom of belief. You know, we've expanded on the idea of freedom. So now people in the Western world feel a sense of freedom to pick and choose. And that's not how these ethno-cultural traditions were done in its most untouched context. And it's still not quite done that way today. So without divination, one doesn't know for sure which path they should be operating. Without truth and understanding of lineage and background and heritage, you're still only operating half full, without a whole degree of knowledge and understanding about who you are, about yourself, to then make a more conscious, more appropriate choice about how to move forward, what path, what tradition should be standing up. When we say voodoo, that's a very general word, beloved. When I say voodoo, I'm talking about ATR. I'm talking about African-based traditional systems, primarily from the mid-Atlantic slave trade. When we say voodoo, voodoo is a product of not just that root of voodoo and voodooing that we know in Togo, Benin, Nigeria, Cameroon, Ghana, etc., but more appropriately to today, it's the voodoo that we know that grew and developed out of the Middle Passage, out of slavery and enslavement in the New World. So we discern by lineage, and we discern by divination what paths one should be operating in, developing in, walking in. And in terms of what I offer for that is ancestral work and divination. All things start in ancestral work and divination. Typically when people are just wanting readings, just wanting deeper understandings, wanting to address something very specifically, love and relationships, career, health, wellness, you know, etc., the challenge, the block, the complication, but they are not necessarily ready to commit to these traditions fully. They typically want services from me less than ancestral work and divination. It's really when people get to that ancestral work and divination, when the bells and the whistles go off, and I can stand up and respond to that level of seriousness about people really being serious about taking their spirit journey to the next level. And again, I'm going to always keep going back to some of the previous questions, that idea of how do I get people of African descent to come back to the ancestors. Again, that is a part of the challenge. We are so westernized. I say it all the time, and I know it offends and it angers people. Make sure the white supremacy is not in you. I'm talking to Black people. Make sure the racism is not in you, because these cultural toxins have sort of been embedded in us uh, from our birth, from our inception, from the school systems in which we've had to, pass through, through the judicial system and the social service system, and all the other isms that are in place to sort of influence how people think, but also people's behavior. So I often have to talk about, the renewing of the mind in order to really get clear, Kiona, about uh, indeed what spirit path we want to walk in. Because it's not religion, it's not Islam, Christianity, Judaism, to say the least. It's more akin to Catholicism, it's more akin to Hinduism, and then, of course, more akin to much more ancient indigenous world traditions that require us to have a renewed mind, that require us sort of regressing, past life regressing back in terms of time to even put ourselves in a position to comprehend what our ancestors would have been thinking, what their motives would have been behind the very root, no pun intended, root of root work, conjure, hoodoo, voodoo, and particularly in the New World. It's almost impossible for us not to start with the Middle Passage. It's almost impossible. On this ground, it's almost impossible because of its relationship to how voodoo showed up in the New World in the first place. Kiona, thank you so much, beloved, for your questions, your participation, your assistance in helping me in keeping the chat room moving forward. Let's see. Yeah, Hoodoo occultism. Okay, that's email. Don't bring your private. Yeah, that's email. Email me because I'm not even going to remember. I'm not even. That's not even going to stick while I'm doing the show. So yeah, please, thank you, Kiona. Send me an email. I can't. I'm not going to be able to hold on to that. The minute I end this broadcast, I'm not going to remember that you even posted that. Please post your questions, comments, requests in all capital letters in the chat so that I can see them and acknowledge them and respond to them here live on air. Also, I welcome you to please use our Blog Talk Radio phone lines at area code 845-277-9143, 845-277-9143. When you're ready with your question, comment, or request, please do press the number 1 on your telephone keypad. This will alert me that there is a caller in queue. It'll give me the opportunity to unmute your mic and bring you into the conversation. All is truly and indeed a blessing. Cornelius B., greetings, beloved. Thank you so much for your participation and your comments in the chat. Cheryl Lynn Simon asked, to what degree does astrology factor in your healing, reading, or conjure work? A great degree. It's very rarely that I even get into the depths of reading without asking about your birthday, your time of birth, your location to birth. And that's one of the things that we're disconnected from in terms of now trying to compartmentalize what's ATR, what's pagan, what's witchcraft, what's Satanism, etc. And so these various schools of thought, astrology, numerology, etc., have been compartmentalized first by culture and tradition. We all have our own cultural understanding of the sky based on what culture we're pulling the tradition, the belief system from. But yet we think of astrology as something Eurocentric, as something Western, as something more modern. And there's nowhere in the ancient world that the mapping of the sky was not important, particularly in a world that did not have the sorts of technological distractions that we might have and possess today. So they spend a great deal of time outdoors before the fire, looking at the sky, mapping and and charting activity in the sky. So there is no voodoo without astrology. There is no Hinduism without astrology. There is no Islam or Christianity without astrology. Uh, the main world religions seek to mask what they call pagan traditions, or synchronize or incorporate them, um, appropriate them in some cases, into the mainstream accepted way of doing things. But really, there is no way to uh, do real healing work, reading work, conjure work without some understanding of the astrology of a person and how that plays in a role, a factor. Even when we look at it culturally, if we look at cultures as personalities, we know the various tribes or cultures or ethnic groups have moved around, have to some degree been mobile. So even when we're looking at our ancestry, what century are you looking at in terms of the footprint of your DNA? And that does show up in your ancestry test, by the way. It's there. You just have to know how to use the platform in which you're navigating in, and so it will give you a understanding of, your test might say Ghana, Nigeria, Cameroon, but then where would you have been? Where would your people have been? Where would your ancestral link have been at any particular time and place during the course of that time, that history? So astrology plays in at every level, at every level. It plays a factor in terms of where you are and where you're doing your work now in relation to the globe. And when I'm discussing quantum metaphysics, I like to say that time is governed by place, which is a mathematical fact. Once you move, change position, shift position, time is already shifting. Our perception of time is shifted based on where we are at any particular place and time, literally or figuratively. So there's no way really to do any work without some level of astronomical awareness and knowledge, if not a greater degree of evolved understanding. Let's see. Whose question am I missing? Can I talk about magic used in Hollywood? Um, Now that's a tricky one, because there's so much propaganda out there about who is using magic in Hollywood and who isn't. Um, it opens up a whole Illuminati can of worms. It opens up a whole secret society of conversation, which I'm willing to do if I have some participants. Now, I'm not necessarily wanting to do it by myself. So y'all are listening in, but y'all not pressing that number one at 845-277-9143. Call in 845-277-9143. So do I believe, first of all, that there's even any magic being used in Hollywood? I do. And not because of the propaganda, not because of the conspiracy theories, not because of the tabloids. But I believe that we're talking about a creative, artistic, often well-resourced community, whether it's financial resource or just having access to who has the resource to a particular person, place, or thing. We know from its outward demonstration, it's a community that likes to explore religion, consciousness, science, math, if not indeed magic. There are very limited number of entertainers who have overtly admitted to any application of magic in their growth, in their progress. I say growth first because, if anything, we're talking about your inner world first, not just the person who wants to sort of use magic to gain material, the signs of the pentacle, material, carnal, um, you know, improvements, whether it's physical enhancements or material enhancements. So we know that it's explored. We know it's an idea that um, pop culture is interested in. We know it's an idea that's sort of played around with to some degree in the movies and in TV shows. There was one movie, not Charmed. I'm talking about a movie. It might have been the Three Heathers. It was three white girls who were in college who no, two white girls and a black girl who were in college who were dabbling with magic. And of course, one wanted to be blonder and prettier, and it worked. Another wanted to be sort of demonic and diabolical. Some of y'all know the movie I'm talking about. And then the black girl characters, for the most part, kind of played along. Um, like sometimes we're stereotyped as being a little bit more fearful of stepping into the dark side than other people. So when it came time to sort of get out, she got out. Um, and then there was the hero of the show who sort of learned to use their power that they had harnessed, that they were experimenting with, to sort of repair the damage they had done, and even gave a suggestion of doing good. So we know the whole idea of it is absolutely something that the entertainment world, the musical world, the acting world has always been associated with. When we look at reefer madness, for instance, and the prohibition of liquor and the prohibition of marijuana in the U.S. and the propaganda that was used back in the day to sort of support that, part of it was that it was either somehow satanic and opened us up to some dark magic, or it was something that made us insane and crazy and caused people to be in insane asylums and locked up in mental health wards, like Billie Holiday, for instance. And this was in a time before we had rehab. This was before AA. This was before people had any compassionate services in place to sort of address whether it be mental health or drug and alcohol abuse and manifestation. So we know that we see um, all forms of magic, religion, consciousness being explored and to some degree manipulated if we believe, again, what's being said in the tabloids about certain groups and certain organizations in Hollywood. So I always say I'm very left-brained. I'm not a conspiracy theorist type. So I do believe that there's some dabbling in it, just like it is in this audience right here, just like it would be in the social media stratosphere. There are curious minds in this audience that are reading all sorts of things, that are attempting all sorts of things, that are experimenting with all sorts of things. And sometimes what's most popular or most popularized floats to the top as it relates to what is then painted upon, marked upon Hollywood. Um, Even when we talk about the quote unquote gay agenda, what is that? Who is that? And if there is a gay agenda, it don't involve black people. It certainly don't involve people of color who are grassroots oriented, who are conscious, who are ethnically and culturally aware, who are spiritually aware. So these theories get started, the ball gets rolling. Hoodoo occultism, that takes me right back to Corona and some of the theories. First, it was black people can't get it, and now it's the highest numbers of people dying with this are black people. Now the saying is, well, it's not that big of a deal, and we should open it up, and we should all get back to work, and of course we have a certain number of black people who are now on board with that theory also. So we got to be careful about being erudite. That's one of my favorite words. I use that word a lot for a reason. We have to be careful about being well thought out, well read, well studied. The magical book says, study to show thyself approved. Study to show thyself approved. And I can explain it Freud can explain it. Einstein can explain it. Falsey can explain it. Trump can explain it. And depending on where you are and your mindset, just from that list, you're going to choose the voice that, that speaks to you. So I think Hollywood, yes, to some degree, has explored, looked into individually, maybe collectively within a peer group, within a social clan. I might be interested in Hoodoo, and then so you all are interested in Hoodoo. So at least we know this core right here is sort of exploring and investing in Hoodoo. But then who is to say that we are then manipulating the market with it, or manipulating Hollywood with it, or manipulating, internet commerce with it? That's when it becomes, into the conspiracy theory realm. And at that point, you have to examine footprints. So I'm much more to find religions and religious organizations and organizations with religious-like structures to be more suspect than Hollywood. I think the union is bigger in Hollywood than any sort of occult, magical, behind-the-scenes conspiracy in terms of people's success. I do believe that people who often want success through magic, through religion, through spiritual practices, choose any religion, choose any church, and then you're going to find a large group of people there that are successful, and maybe not just in one career lane. There are many career lanes that intersect with what we say is Hollywood. What about hair and makeup? Are the hair and makeup people doing magic? What about the lighting and the electricians and catering? Are they doing magic? Housekeeping, janitorial. There are no really low-paying jobs, in quote-unquote Hollywood. So who's to say? Are our doctors, are our lawyers, are they indeed using a form of magic? Now, when we look at Masons, Shriners, Ivy League schools, fraternities, sororities, indeed, we can track a pattern of information, shared information, shared resources that show up as a demonstration of success. We can point out sorors and fraternity, brothers who all various stratospheres of life and success. So I'm much more apt to say that there might be individuals in not just Hollywood, but in any industry who might be utilizing, tapping into their knowledge base, their spiritual. If they're aware of their knowledge base and they're aware that their spiritual power is part of their knowledge base, then they would use that. You can be college educated, even Ivy League, but if you don't know that you have power deeper than intellectual power, then you aren't using your magic. Then you aren't tapping the magic. Yeah, I believe the directors and the writers and the script writers, the creative people are not only using, Karen, I think that's you, I'm gonna open your mic, are not only using mythology, but when you have writer's block, or you aren't particularly creative, or you just need something new to come up with, you are going to be influenced by what you've been exposed to. Now, I've been exposed to a lot as a child of a retired school teacher, music school teacher, one of the first teachers, period, to bring Black history, Black music, Black Christmas, Kwanzaa, to the school system. This was before Kwanzaa. This was before we saw Black History Month, for instance, being even acknowledged in the public school system. So I was a different kind of child. And my parents, just like many of you right now, are ensuring that your child will be exposed to more than just um, Eurocentric culture, Eurocentric history. Many of you are bedreaded and cultural and Islamic and Shiite and Sufi and Hindued up and Buddhist up and Voodooed up, and you're going to then pass down your knowledge, your awareness to your children. Now we know that the apple don't fall from far from the tree, but sometimes the apple will get a worm. Sometimes a child will not necessarily do what our parents want us to do, and particularly in those, excuse me, those formative years, your teens, your adolescence, your teens, going into your 20s. But sometimes you'll find that by 33, your boys and your girls will sort of settle in and mature, and a great deal of what seeds the parents planted will then come up to the surface. Kiana, by the way, your mic is open. Just jump in when you get ready. But yeah, I believe that. Greetings, beloved. How you doing?
I'm good. No, I'm clear on what my path is. It's just, I was asking a question because oftentimes I notice people will watch YouTube videos or they'll see the instant spiritualist on social media, and they're drawn to it. And so I was asking, like, how would one know? You know,
They're drawn to it for all the wrong reasons. They're drawn to it for the same reason that many people are drawn to a Creflo Dollar or a TV Jakes or a Fred Rice. Prosperity, wealth, finances. Even at the more basic level, these people look happy. These people don't look like they have a problem. These people look like they're doing okay. You know, so that first gets you at sort of the emotional level. But then people are looking at the Mercedes and the Jaguars and the BMWs parked out in front of the church, the Cadillacs and the Lincolns, and the fine clothing. And in the modern culture, where that's what you see on TV, you don't see Family Matters or All in the Family and they're in their worst clothes. Even Good Times, you know, those were set clothes. Those were Hollywood costumes. You know, you aren't seeing the reality of dirt and grime and hard knocks and experience that people are living every day. So it's real easy for someone who's not erudite, who's not analytical, who's not skeptical, who doesn't understand looking beyond the illusion, looking beyond just what it looks like, what it sounds like, to what's deeper beneath what it is that you think you're desiring of. And everything I say is literal and figurative, because the more figurative aspect of that is what need are you trying to feed? Often I had to figure that out, particularly in a reading, within 15 seconds. Because even if someone types out, you know, I'm interested in my career in an email request, by the time they get on the phone, it's 15 minutes about their love and relationship house. And then I remind them, well, you opened up saying you're interested. Oh, yeah, I'm interested in my career. So we're not even often clear, Kiona, about what it is that we want, what it is that we need. And as gods and goddesses, that's the signal we send out to creation. So we get that kind of response back from creation, random spikes of highs and lows, of good times and bad times, of feeling imbalanced. When the reality is, I say it a lot, my all is a blessing is not affected by the weather. It's not affected by corona. It's not affected by what I have or what I don't have. My ability to show up and be present in my truth at any given day, at any given point of the day, it's not affected by the physical realm or the carnal realm or the material realm, you know, or whether I'm hungry in the moment or not. And we as humans have that great ability. You know, if it's making it to 4 o'clock or to punch out, you push right through the hunger. You push right through the tiredness. You push right through the stress or the noise, you know, in the environment that you might be living in. But it's then when we get to that spirit work where now we need to tone down the noise, and particularly our own noise, our own inner voice, our own gatekeeper that's constantly challenging every bit of information, every bit of visual and audio and inner stimuli that we get from the world. So that makes it even harder, Kiona, for us to get clear about what our calling really is. So we got to be sure that first you're not just seeking. I'm just seeking and I just want to find something. I just don't know what I want to find. I just want to find something. You know, we don't always use those words, but sometimes that's the energy that's projected. And my mom taught us as kids, jinn respond to that. Demons respond to that. You know, people get to whisper it in your ear. Spirit will get to whisper it in your, oh, you need a little of this. Try this. This will help you out, girl. To take this pill, you know, try this drug. That's how some people get into drugs and alcohol for the very first time. And so we're just not willing often to do that work to really first know who we are, understand your brokenness. You can't deny your brokenness. You gotta understand it in order to disrupt that process, that pull for your life to repeat any of it. Or have any of it then show up again through other people, places, and things. So we got to be willing to do that shadow work. Shadow work. Shadow work comes up almost every day, and we never really go into a whole lot of great detail about it. I wanted to talk today before we got off into an hour of show. I wanted to talk today about vampires, and not European vampires or Hollywood vampires, movie vampires, but African vampires. I think it's important that people understand that, again, these ideas, these images that we now relegate to Hollywood, that we now relegate to European culture, that we now relegate to, oh, well, we learned that through fairy tales, or we learned that through nursery rhymes, that these concepts and ideas absolutely existed in the indigenous world in some format that we might not just be aware of, be educated on. And of course, if you don't know it, if you aren't aware of it, then you can't defend from it. You can't protect from it. So I wanted to talk about the various vampire stories and legends and cultures that exist, and particularly in West Africa, Central Africa, the regions in which many of our people and our bloodlines would have been pulled from. And my reason for that is sometimes I think when I mention jinn on the show, when I mention demons on the show, immediately people have an Islamic Christian connection to the information. They don't necessarily see it as ATR. They don't necessarily see it as a product of what we deal with and might confront every day in hoodoo, root work, conjure, voodoo, you know, etc. And so there is this knowledge of awareness of vampires. And it's not, you know, sort of this bat-like blood-sucking thing that we've come to understand. It is more akin to the energy vampire. Africa is full of history and culture and legends and traditions. So even at the university level, when I was studying Pan-African studies at the college level, a great deal of time was spent focusing on creation stories. The Kikuyu creation story, the Ewe creation story, the Yoruba creation story, and how the various ethnic groups in various geographic diverse locations on the continent, how they view the creation of the world. And so it made understanding and receptivity to other world cultural traditions that much more easy for me to sort of digest. And in that journey, I came across African vampires. And I've posted and reposted about African vampires at least once or twice a year over the last decade or so on social media. But many of my new listeners, you may have never even heard this before. So one of the first common African vampires is Obeifo. Obeifo. And the living vampire Obeifo is found in West Africa, was said to be either male or female. And in some versions of the legend, the Obeifo had the power to leave its body and travel to its victim in the forms of a big ball of light, orbs. And we hear now today, Coast to Coast AM, your astrology conversations, your tarot conversations, all your new age, kind of spiritual conversations. We hear all this talk about orbs. We see posting pictures of orbs, in Facebook and in social media every now and then. I have a Haitian friend who posts a great deal of photographs, and every now and then it's a great deal of orbed photographs in the pictures. And I think about Obeifo. Obeifo travels in balls of light, in orbs. And others have said that this creature stayed in human form, but that a big green light would emit from its rectum and from its armpits. And that sounds extraterrestrial to me. That sounds otherworldly to me. And so we talk about aliens, for instance, and how come we never hear about Black people being abducted, which is not entirely true, by the way. In fact, I think the oldest story, the first well-documented alien abduction, was a biracial couple, Black man, white woman. So it's not entirely true that Black people don't have interactions with aliens and extraterrestrials. We look at a cultural dynamic. The Northwest African people, y'all know who I'm talking about. They have the huge dancing mask they wear on their head. Oh wow, I'm drawing a blank. Come on now, Hoodoo occultism. You know what people I'm talking about, who have a well-documented history and reference to Syria and regions in the sky. It'll come to me in a minute. Oh wow, some of their most sacred spaces are in the rocky cliff edges, and there's these sacred temple-like spaces that they create out of the rock. They're one of the more favored ethnic groups in the Pan-African diaspora. You all know who I'm talking about. It'll come to me, but they have a well-documented understanding of ancient alien intervention in humanity. Yes, the Dogon. Thank you, Hoodoo occultism. I knew you would pull it out for me first. The Dogon. So even in that aspect of the description, the green light emitting from parts of Obeifo body orifices speaks of something alien or otherworldly to me. Its favorite meal was said to be blood of children, but it also drank the sap and vital juices in a crop, causing great blight and starvation and famine by way of Obeifo. Another more southern African vampire is the Tikoloshi. The Tikoloshi, this creature looks like a freakish baboon. It can be found in the southernmost African plains. The Tikaloshi is a kind of psychic vampire that doesn't feed upon the blood, but instead on the energy of its victims. It is best known for its horrific sexual appetite. Most stories tell of the monster raping them, feeding off the life force of women. Some say that a witch doctor can trap and destroy a Tikaloshi's power by luring it with milk. So, um, when I try and talk about jinn and demons and other elemental forces that absolutely interfere with and connect with humanity, I'm not being old world. I'm not being Christian. I'm not being Islamic or Judaic. It is indeed another aspect of ATR that, or the traditional African religious system that is not popularized in ATR, that is not a part of the Orisha romance or our general cultural love affair that we have historically had seasonally with various ethnic groups of various regions of the continent. Remember back in the 70s, it was all about Ethiopia and Sudan and Somalia and repatriation back to the motherland. And there were a large number of African Americans and Caribbeans, Jamaicans who made their way back to Ethiopia, who I believe still reside there to some degree today. Some of them then, in the late 70s, I believe it was, when I think it was Carter who helped in sending the Israelite Ethiopians back to Israel. And so that is then how another group of African Americans who had originally been in Ethiopia then relocated to Israel with that movement. And some of them are still here today. One of my close associates here in New Orleans, sister, may she rest in Orun. Both her sister and her mother, unfortunately, have passed away. But her sister was from Israel. And I can remember sort of a GoFundMe being organized some years back, I don't know, 10 years back maybe, sort of get her back to the States because she was suffering from cancer at the time. So I look at some of these legends, some of these stories, and see the crossroads, the intersections with other tribes, other ethnic groups, but even other stories as they are now told in the so-called New World, and indeed in the Western world. I, like many of you, believe that a great deal of what we believe to be true, even though it's masked differently. And we need to talk about masking. Some of y'all still upset about Baba Oye. But are masked now in these sort of Western images and these Western symbolisms. And indeed, we have been disconnected, cut off from the original meaning of many of these things. But we've had a great deal of knowledge and information and advancement and mentors and elders since the 60s, since the 70s. So we really don't have an excuse now to better educate ourselves and better have a greater deal of fluidity as African Americans, Pan-African globally, trans-African consciousness should be broader and greater than sometimes what we experience among ourselves. The Nomos, yes, the Nomos from the Dogon people. Yes, I mentioned the Obaifu, I mentioned the Tikaloshi. There's also the Adze, A-D-Z-E. The Adze is a vampire feared by the Airway people. My people are Airway. We often associate voodoo with the Airway people. In fact, the word Airway makes its way into Yoruba, and we associate it with herbs and plants, the medicine, if you will, in the Ifa. So the Airway today, presently, inhabit largely Ghana. But we see Ewe in southern Togo, and the Adzi took on the form of a firefly. A firefly may not invoke a lot of fear in anyone in the Western world, from Mississippi or St. Louis or Kansas, who's used to seeing fireflies. But this vampire isn't one to be taken for granted. If caught, the Adzi being may revert into a quasi-human form, that of a human-like figure with a hunchback, sharp baboon-like talons, and jet black skin. It was in this form that it was most dangerous, for it could then kill the victim, drink their blood, eat their heart and liver. It is said that children are the Adzi's favorite food. And often we hear that connection to children and instilling fear in children. And indeed, we have our own Western American, Southern, wherever you might live in the diaspora, stories of monsters and ghosts and boogeymen that we often tell to sort of keep children in line, to sort of prevent children from exposing themselves to danger. And we instill fear of the dark in our children by doing this. We instill other fears that then rise up later on in life as jinn in adults, 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old adults, that then still have to be arrested. Another vampire is Asan Bosam. Asan Bosam, Asanbosam, Asan Bosam or Asan Bosam, a vampire known among the Ashanti people of southern Ghana and by the people in the areas of Ivory Coast and Togo. The Aban Bosam is said to live deep in the forest where it preys mainly upon hunters. It looks mostly human, except that it has teeth made from iron, and its legs are hooks, like iron hooks. And anyone unlucky enough to walk by a tree that this vampire might be hanging from will be scooped up and killed and destroyed by the Asan Bosam. Another vampire is a Sasa Ban Sam, the Sasa Ban Sam. This vampire is very similar to the Asan Bosam, for they also live in trees or dangle from trees like vampires and drink the blood of anyone that walks underneath them. The difference between the two, though, is their appearance. While the Sasa Ban Sam also looks humanoid, it doesn't have hooks or iron teeth. Instead, it looks like a mix between human and a bat. Its arms are short and stubby, and it has big wings. Some legend says that its wingspan reaches nearly 20 feet. Now, for my listeners and my viewers who appreciate Coast to Coast AM, for those of you unfamiliar, Coast to Coast AM typically repeats twice at night. I think it starts at 10, 11, 12, 1, and then it starts over again at 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's a 4-hour podcast, radio broadcast that you typically catch on talk radio back in the day, pre-Katrina. Now you can also enjoy it, listen to it online, and it's called Coast to Coast AM. And one of the things that they talk about are these huge, giant animals, particularly bats, birds. Some say could be left over from dinosaur period. Some say could be existing in some hidden interdimensional space within the planet. That's where your discussions about flat Earth and the like come in. There are some who believe that the caps of our planet cover up holes or vortexes in which other worlds might exist underneath. which might explain why we might have a Nessie, for instance, the Loch Ness monster, or these huge, oversized flying birds that might be reptiles, reptilian, left over from other time periods. Or it's also been suggested they are indeed accessing wormholes or openings in interdimensional space and are coming and going in our environment. So laying up at night listening to this show, I've heard talk about flying birds, flying humanoids. There was a video that made the rounds on Instagram, I want to say in the last month, that documents, I believe in Mexico, this flying humanoid. It almost looks like a shadow or shadow person, but indeed it's flying, it's gliding through the air. So some of these concepts that are being discussed are not new, are not even modern, and are most certainly not limited to Europe, Eurasia, North America, Canada, are absolutely being documented historically, but also in modern times, in all regions of the world, and even Africa. Another vampire is the Impondulu. The Impondulu, this vampire is from the Eastern Cape region of South Africa. The Impondulu is actually a witch's servant, or rather familiar. It usually owned by a female witch, and is later passed on by the mother to the daughter. So it's almost like a zombie, an enslaved spirit, if you will, that's then inherited down, captured, and then passed down through the family. To some degree, this is also done in Haiti, by the way, when in the capturing of souls and the capturing of spirits in coves. Often when a Hogan or Great Mambo passes on, those pots, those taurines, those implements are then transferred to a godchild, not just a blood relative, but someone who's initiated in the care for those implements. I think we see it to some degree also in Lukumi, the passing down of taurines and pots and implements, particularly when people pass away, to the children, or if not biological children, the spiritual religious children of the owner, previous owner, so that their power is not released nefariously or released improperly, and then could later show up and cause harm in the culture, in the community, in the society. This vampire had an insatiable love for blood. The Impondulu would feed on not only humans, but also cattle as well. And we see in the ancient uh, alien theorist stories about newer modern alien intervention, we see the sort of mutilation of cattle, which has been well documented, by the way, but no one can particularly explain the mutilation of these cattle and sheep, herd animals in particular, not just wild animals, but particularly herd animals, farm animals, animals that we would corral in large groups together. And so we find in South Africa that the Impondulu would also feed upon people's cattle. Unlike other African vampires, which usually appear in some monstrous form, the Impondulu looks a lot like a gorgeous young male, which is why some legends claim that this witch and her Impondulu would become more than just familiars, but would be intimately involved. It would be suggested that uh, the witch, the practitioner, is now form a marriage, a commitment to the spirit, and we see voodoo marriage in Haiti, in the marrying of Loa, and a official, formal, technical marriage ceremony takes place with bridegrooms, with maids, with witnesses, with participants, with the after party, and all of the above. It is one of the mysteries in Haitian voodoo practice and tradition, the marriage to Aloha. And so certain days might be gifted, surrendered to the Loa. And so you might not even be involved with your husband or your wife um, during that particular period of fasting. Fasting might be a safe way to share this information. Certain foods you can't eat, certain taboos that you must adhere to and follow in the voodoo marriage to a particular loa or deity. And by way of this marriage, it is said that the owner gained a certain access to power, information, miraculous power through this relationship, that new skills are taught on, new information is passed on from the loa to the horse or the partner who the person has the marriage with. So this again, it's not a new world concept. It's a concept that has indeed an ancient and indigenous footprint. And right now I'm looking at Africa, but I could easily pull out Australia. I could easily pull out Asia. I could easily look at other regions of the world and find similarities to these spirits and these practices. Thank you so much, everyone, for being actively engaged. I'm shy and participating. Hoodoo occultism, you're asking, do people still use these spirits? Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely, hands down, without a doubt. Um, as I've already suggested, and you know what I'm going to say, we don't see it as much, we don't hear about it as much, because the internet is dominated, for the most part, by the Western world. I mean, it's available to anyone who has access to internet. I mean, I've spoken specifically about African nations where the internet is not even allowed. And if it is allowed, you're absolutely not allowed to get involved in social media, to making certain types of commentary. So we're not seeing these, I'm trying to be diplomatic now, these lesser served communities of ethnic groups and cultures and traditions showing up online the way we do Western cultures, the way we do European cultures, the way we do even Maria Leonza, for instance, which is the biggest indigenous ancestral practice in Venezuela. But few people know that here in the States. Few people know that in the Western world. So yeah, they're absolutely still active. They're absolutely still being utilized. These forces are absolutely still being tapped into. Shells, Lenore, thank you so much for your comment and your participation. Thank you so much. Guinevere Reed, Alafia to you as well, beloved. Thank you so much for your comments and your participation. I'm glad to hear you also enjoy Coast to Coast. If you never listen to Coast to Coast, you're missing something. Now, let me say, it ain't like Art Bell. Art Bell was the original host of Coast to Coast, and those were the glory days of Coast to Coast. And they often will recycle those shows in archive on the live broadcast for you to hear the Art Bell days of Coast to Coast. But it's still a very powerful show. They talk about everything from psychic skills and abilities to numerology, divine math, ancestral intervention, alien intervention, ancient aliens, governmental conspiracies. Right now, they're covering everything from 5G to coronavirus. So it's a powerful show, very entertaining show for those who find you can't sleep at night, you're up at night, or you work graveyard shift. Coast to Coast will ride you through to the break of dawn. Coast to Coast will ride you through until your local talk radio stations begin to air they 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning news and early morning shows. It's an all-night show. Um, yeah, the black Jews are called Coptic Jews, Ethiopian Jews, African Jews, and Falashi Jews. And some of them, I was referencing, made that trip back to Israel, because I know a few of them. Um, and I can't remember now in what context we were discussing that. So please forgive me. I don't always see the chat right away. I'm hearing thought indigenous people couldn't be witches. No, Kiona, you're hearing that wrong. Particularly if you're hearing it from me. I'm saying that indigenous people don't support witches. Indigenous people don't see the concept of being a witch as a positive thing. And so in the context of vampires, that's not a positive thing. And so a witch, male or female, it's often female in this South African context, but male or female, who would then harness such a thing, a vampire, Impalu, my tongue gets all twisted up when I start trying to, the Impandalu, that's not a positive thing. That's not something one would want to aspire to. And there are locations, even now, Nigeria, Ghana, Cameroon, you can be stoned to death. They're not calling the police. They're not waiting on intervention from the government. They ain't waiting on pastor evangelists to come and work it out. There are places in the Congo. There are places in Sudan. There are places all over Africa where you can literally be lynched by your community for the fear of being a witch. So the Western concept of witch, particularly our black witches, is that it's somehow a positive thing. It's an empowering thing. Oh, I'm just getting back to my roots. I'm just getting back to my ancestors. No, you're not. Because if you're getting back to your ancestors, then you know there's a difference between divine magic and witchcraft. I like to think about childbirth. Some people say the black woman is God. Therefore, the black woman is God. Okay. And so and when we think about what Iyami is, and how Iyami is often misinterpreted as witchcraft. But the act of pushing a baby out, ain't that an act? That's an act of divine magic. That's not witchcraft. That's an act of divine magic. So in the Western concepts, bewitched and Halloween witch, we've given witch, a familiar, a safe face, just like demons, just like jinn, just like voodoo, just like all these traditions. There's this aggressive, overriding attempt to make it safe for people in the context of Western culture, where Islam is supreme, Judaism is supreme, Christianity is supreme. So no, being a witch in Africa is never a good thing. It's not something that people aspire to do. It is a concept that is well understood in many regions of the indigenous world, and you can be killed for it, hands down. Hag, Guinevere, is a Eurocentric word. They are considered a Eurocentric form of a vamp. Hags, succubus, incubus. We describe some of those characteristics in some of the forms of the earlier forms of African vampires that I mentioned earlier on in the document, of having a sexual energy and or nature about them. In one case, where the Impandalu, for instance, are said to often mask as beautiful young men. They're not scary. They're not frightful. And so then the idea that they can then attach themselves to women or men, just like hags or just like succubus in European culture. Now, hags tend to be frightful, scary, old, haggard, but a hag can also show up as a young, attractive female and ride you. And in the course of the ride, the human then realizes that they're being rode by this old, haggard hag. It's been displayed in movies. It's been played around with in creative imagination many times over. But it's also part of the legends that follow hags in European culture. I wasn't sure, Kiln, that I ever gave out a number. I just started calling them off. Now, listen, I've been watching. Now, I'm looking at your spelling. So you clearly know the document that I'm pulling from. I just never did say how many. In fact, there are more than what on this list. The last one on the list that you're looking at is a Ramanga. A Ramanga. And this is a living vampire found among the Basilio tribe in Madagascar. And the Ramanga is a person that performs disgusting services for the chiefs of the tribe. Whenever a person of high standing had his or her nails clipped or endured a medical treatment in which blood was spilled, the Ramanga was expected to eat the nail clippings and drink the blood. If there wasn't a Ramanga nearby at the time, the clippings and the blood were carefully preserved until the return of the ceremonial vampire. And this, in my opinion, is probably one of the more frightful of them all, because we're really speaking to humans who operated in the role of ingesting of sort of these leftover remains of the royal family in order to keep their power from being captured. And some of that practice still shows up today. It shows up in my family. I have family till this day who won't clip their nails, who won't comb through their hair and leave that hair and those nail clippings anywhere for anybody to access. And they will burn them. They will set them alight. Some will flush them, thinking that that's somehow a safer alternative to just, leaving them about. I personally never clip my nails in the house, period. Ever. Ever, 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 ever. Until I clip my nails in the house, and I don't allow other people to do either. So that fear, that anxiety, that warning is something that is not just ancient. It's not just cultural or ethnic specific, but it's something that we find throughout all remote regions of the world. One day when I have more time, I'm going to do Mayan and Aztec and some of the other ethnic groups that we now intersect with. I wanted to talk a little bit more today about Maria Leonza, in particular, as a voodoo or an indigenous practice, because of its size and its strength in Venezuela, in South America, in Latin culture, but also because of its striking similarities, if you will, to hoodoo, root work, conjure practice. Maria Leonza is an indigenous Venezuelan religion that dates back to the 14th century, combining Catholic, West African, and indigenous religions. It was outlawed from being practiced until 1959. At that time in history, Maria Leonza no longer hides from society, being transferred through means of oral tradition and family kinship. Instead, it has built a strong foundation through politics and documented literature. Now, we might see hoodoo and conjure has gained sort of a new visibility through oral tradition and through music. I've been inserting hoodoo blues and root work blues and conjure-oriented music onto my YouTube platform. And I see about 50 of you are listening to the music and enjoy the music. But I invite many more of you to take the time to visit my main YouTube page, youtube.com/Voodoo Thai, VOODOOTYE, and listen to some of this music. As the pilgrimage has gained popularity and approximately 50% of Venezuelans attend, the state has become involved in the practice, the tradition, the religion that is Maria Leonza. In 1960, the state named Mount Sorte the location of the pilgrimage for Maria Leonza, a national park, giving them more authority over the land. So now not only does this practice, a hoodoo-like practice in Venezuela, have a tradition, have a pilgrimage that has become a part of the national, the state activity, but they now have land on which to actively participate and practice their sacred traditions. However, it was not until the late 1980s that Mount Sorte was named a national monument, changing laws regarding the treatment of the mountain and its inhabitants. And since it has been made a national monument, guards have been placed at stations to keep an eye on the monument, on this sacred site. And in recent years, the state has become more and more involved in the pilgrimage itself. So the state has now also found a way to sort of, if you can't beat them, join them. It has sort of taken on control, if you will, of this practice of Maria Leonza to some degree. And so therefore that automatically changes what's done, what's presented, what's authentic, and what's considered legitimate. You've heard me say in previous shows that, oh wow, I'm running out of time. You've heard me say in previous shows that you're not seeing sacred ceremony often in Congo Square because of the legalities of Congo Square being a public place, in a public park, in a city that's open to all people in a modern context. We see sort of a ceremonial acknowledgement of what ancient history has told us has gone on in Congo Square. But you're not seeing real voodoo. You're not seeing active ceremony there because we have to share that space with other people. What sets Maria Leonza apart is now having access to this mountain on which they can now live and reside and perform this loosely organized tradition. Another reason that I compare Maria Leonza to Hoodoo, it doesn't have a text, it doesn't have a book, it doesn't necessarily have a hierarchy of leaders, if you will, and even the practices themselves among adherents and participants of Maria Leonza vary a great degree from person to person, location to location, family to family, just like hoodoo, just like root work, just like conjure. So this is a great introduction into Maria Leonza. I'm probably going to go a whole great deal more into Maria Leonza on tomorrow. It's 1:45. I appreciate your time and your energy and your love and your support. I have an open phone line at area code 847. I'm sorry, 845-277-9143. 845-277-9143. People are listening, but no one is commenting and or participating. I am looking at my live chat, Kiona. So help me find my questions in the chat. I see Guinevere's comments. The women in her family have always passed down to us to never leave your hair. Children's hair or lover's hair, nail clippings or blood. cloth pads around because they can be used for voodoo um, um, and hoodoo. Absolutely. They don't do that in voodoo, but they most certainly do that in voodoo. Um, and it's still common even today. Even today in Louisiana, people typically adhere to that. Even if it's a superstition, they typically adhere to that. We're going to lose those phone lines soon in terms of your ability to call in and ask your question. So you really should get on the phone lines now at 845-277-9143 in the event that you indeed plan to have a question or comment you would like to share at 2 o'clock as we move into the archive hour. If we are still broadcasting. Weird Mafia asks, what are some of the ways to prevent and keep vampires out and keep them from interfering in your life? And I know I expanded a little bit on your question. She just said, what are some ways to keep vampires away? Um, there are all sorts of ways. Cleaning is critical. I say that all the time. One of the first things that we do, whether it's hoodoo, conjure, root work, voodoo, is the cleanliness, the development of sacred space. And even if we're talking about your home, even if we're talking about yourself, and the higher your light, the higher your power, the higher your vibration, makes it much more difficult for wayward jinn, demons, vampires to even have access to you. Even when we look at Eurocentric based vampire culture and tradition, there's that element of volunteering that comes into play. Um, Vampires typically can't just ascend onto you without you giving them permission in some way, without you opening up to them in some way, without you letting them in. Hence the Impalu, which is an attractive male figure, might be of interest to the right woman, might be sexually attractive to the right woman. And some of you are seeking partners and relationships through what it looked like, how attractive it is, how much money do they have, what type of car do they drive, and that, beloved, is an entryway into allowing vampires into your world, into your existence. That's a way we voluntarily open the door. Me and my mom discussed yesterday about donations and being philanthropic, and particularly in this particular time when so many people are in need, and asking for things, and how little it takes for some people to give, to open up if they hear the right sad story, or if they see the right animal commercial, and how quickly they might open up and give up their offering and or donation. And she shared a story about someone she knew who had been gifting um, this. I'm being careful about not giving away too many details. This religious family who had been making crusades to Africa, only to find out later on that this family was quite possibly wealthy, lived in a mansion, um, owned several businesses, but then still gave that sort of that look of need and charity, and utilized that to their advantage. We talked a few days ago about news articles over the years of people who in Chicago, in Miami, in a wheelchair, or look homeless, or look like they on the street. That has become a new job, by the way. That has become a new industry. Up until this virus, we had somebody set up at every traffic stop in town in New Orleans with a sign and a cup and a bucket. And some of these people are going home to housing, beloved. Some of these people are going home to cars. One young lady sits up in front of a business every day and leaves and gets in a huge luxury car. And so people begin to challenge the business in terms of, are you allowing this to happen? Are you in cahoots? Why aren't you, preventing this, sort of thing from happening? So it's real easy for people to let their guard down, Weird Mafia, to not just vampires, but to demons and jinn by way of the trick that we say is SU, by way of the trick that we say is Legba. Because remember now, Legba have to open and close the door. Legba has to open and close the gate. And you all hear me say all the time, the trick that we try and accuse Legba of is really self. It's really ego. It's really when we think we know, when we think we got it down, when we think we got every base covered, when we think we're fine and we're operating from ignorance or operating from ego or operating and leaning on our own understanding. Weird Mafia, that's when we open the door and give permission to and allow vampires to come in. And sometimes they will test you first. We see that in the horror movies. They might come up with, a need. Can I borrow a cup of sugar? Okay, but then a cup of sugar turns into a bag of flour, or a pound of, fat meat, or money to pay my rent, So we all open up that door by, even if we think we're doing right, even if we think we're doing good, by getting in our feelings. You relying on your emotion, or relying on your sympathies, or relying on your visuals, what you think you're looking at, what you think you see. Over the years, I've done something on this show that many people still to this day won't do. I invite y'all to look at me. I invite y'all to investigate my footprint. My mom will be here sometimes on the show. My sister be here sometimes on the show. I got people I went through, not high school, kindergarten, grammar school, junior high school with that are in my social media. So I'm in no way hiding on any level. And I invite people to do their research. But it's surprising to me how little research people will not only do before they, give a total West African stranger $1,000 to fix their love life, but how easy it is for many of you to open up your heart. Whether it be to the stray cat, whether it be to the stray stranger, whether it be to the possible criminal, whether it be to the potential love connection. Some of you are not willing to do the homework, or the minute your feelings and your emotions and your chemistry gets involved, all bets are off. You're not seeing clearly. And so Weird Mafia, that's how the vampires get in. It's when we put our guard down to things that we should be wise enough, smart enough to be paying attention to. Because of my years on the street, back in the day when I was a homeless kid, I learned to pay attention to what was on the ground. So even now, I'm acutely aware of how easy it is for us to walk about, especially in these big cities, and not pay attention to what's on the ground at all. If folks are on their device, they're not even looking up. Not only are they not looking at the ground, they're not looking at traffic, they're not paying attention to the obstacles along the way, the obstacles in the road. And that's how vampires find their way. Thank you, Kiona. Hoodoo occultism asks, let's say if someone tried to harm a person who married to a spirit, what happens? Just like Sajiti, just like a Bochi, but greater than a spirit double, greater than Egby. And it's a similar concept as Ifa, Egby, by the way. The deity attacks. Someone who's rightfully married to a Loa has the protection, it's said to have the protection of that Loa. It's also said to have the taboos of that Loa. So if that Loa, has a preference for things that are white, you can't eat rice, you can't eat mashed potatoes, you can't eat French fries, you can't eat grated coconut, you can't drink milk, You can't eat ice cream. If those are taboo for that particular Loa deity that you're in the mirage with. Different deities have different requirements, so it's going to be very individualistic to not only that power, but the road of that power that's manifesting. But they absolutely will defend, protect. For many years, I've documented sort of that occurrence in my own life. I've never been one to quickly want to put a curse on somebody, bind somebody, do somebody harm. My sister tell you, I even wasn't a fighter as a kid. I was a kid that would have been more likely to have been bullied than to been, aggressive in any way. But even your magical book says, touch not my anointed. Even your magical book says it's better hoodoo occultism that a millstone be tied around your neck than to touch my anointed. So this is not just a voodoo concept. It shows up even in religion. The idea of doing harm to the righteous, doing harm to someone undeserving, doing harm to someone who's done no harm to you. The presence of the voodoo mirage just makes that amplified. Just makes that show up much sooner than it might in nature. We put fertilizer and sometimes natural and organic fertilizers on our gardens to help, fuel the growth process, to help speed up the growth process and to give them extra nourishment for endurance and strength. And so the voodoo marriage has many of the similar outcomes for someone who's crossed. I've warned people about crossing spirit and spirit lines. Some of you know the story of someone breaking into my house and violating shrines and ending up dead within a matter of 5 days. So it's very dangerous, Kimberly McTowell, to work with demons, jinns, but also Loa and Orisha. It's very dangerous. And particularly if you aren't knowledgeable of the Loa, the Orisha, the jinn. It can be extremely dangerous. I've often talked about them answering your sort of desperate pleas for help, but then there always being some sort of price attachment to it. There's always an ebo, there's always a sacrifice attached to it, and so the risk is your own blood. The risk is your own life. The risk is your own sense of well-being. And again, Kimberly Mattel, that's where Eshu comes in. That's where the trick comes in, where we think that by building some relationship with demons and jinn, that we can only get and reap the positive benefits of that without ever having some negative repercussion, without ever developing some debit on your record that then has to show up somewhere else in your life. So you harness a jinn, you harness a demon, to gain great financial prosperity, for instance. The price of that might be your child. The price of that might be your children. The price of that might be your lover or your spouse or your love relationship path. So there's always a give and take, and there's always a risk attached to demons and jinn. So I don't teach it, I don't suggest it, I don't advise it. I've had to correct it. I've had to address it when it shows up, through my godchildren or my clients. But it's not a good idea to work with them, no. To bind them, block them, rebuke them, send them back to their origins. Kimberly Mattel, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Absolutely. But to work with them, no. Yeah, vampires are extremely deceptive, weird mafia, just like in the movies. They can mirror In fact, let me get biblical just for a second and pull from the magical book. It is said that Lucifer was the most attractive angel in heaven. It was said that Lucifer had the power of music, creativity, art. So we take that symbolism and transfer it back to the earth. Then it would say that any jinn, any vampire, any demon with shape shifting qualities, and sometimes they're not always shapeshifters, sometimes they can present an illusion. They can, like a glass, like a mirror, like a hologram, they can present an illusion. And so sometimes that illusion is very real. It's tangible, it's physical, it's material. Other times that illusion is like Twilight Zone, and you see it, but other people don't. You're in love with it, but your girlfriends and them don't get it. They don't see it at all, and they don't understand why you don't see it either. And so it could very well be a jinn. It could very well be a vampire. And yes, these forces can show up very human. They are often your friends, your family, your love interest, your co-workers, people that you know are sometimes around intimately every day. You know. So thank you, Danette Gibbs, for your resounding very dangerous. Absolutely very dangerous. Yes, Kiona, being married to a Loa absolutely requires a ceremony. Absolutely. It's done by calling, but through ceremony. If we're looking at Haitian voodoo, for instance, the mambo, the hogan might be possessed with Loa and then pronounce the coming marriage or the coming connection or the coming relationship upon you in the course of ceremony, ritual ceremony. But then in an authentic voodoo ritual, that would then have to be verified. Because y'all heard me say the other day, people can fake the Holy Ghost, people can fake tongues, people can fake trances. And so that would have to be validated by way of divination. And then the marriage, just like any real marriage, is then planned for. You know, from your plates, cups, and saucers to the attire, to what's going to be worn by the participants in the ceremony. So it's a big deal. It has unfortunately, to some degree, become a part of the economic engine of many third world countries that have religion, that have culture, that have tradition, that are very attractive to the Western world. And so now these ceremonies have become a part of tourism. And so I know some people personally who are, you know, running a tourist pipeline from here to Haiti and back for these ceremonies in which people are marrying Loa, primarily for vain reasons, for vanity, for greed, for power and control, and not for spirit. Greetings, Sterling Miller. Thank you so much, Michael Teganon. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Thank you so much for being present and sharing in the show. Do the Orisha ever take lives? I believe that's your question. Do the Orisha ever take lives? Sterling Miller is asking. Absolutely. The Orisha will take a life when they feel violated. The Orisha will take a life when someone has consciously chosen to violate taboos. So that's someone who actively, consciously has received Orisha on their head, who knows better, who knows what the taboos are, who knows what the rules and regulations are, who then sets out to go against that. But that would also apply to someone who's dabbling in Orisha, who has no legitimate connection to Orisha at all, who has not had voodoo marriage, who has not had a real ceremony giving them access to the mysteries, the secrets. I described that the other day as having the access to a woman's sacred parts, having the access to a man's sacred parts. We don't randomly do that to strangers, or we should. I know we have some free thinkers in the room, but we describe it in a very similar fashion. So, yeah, Orisha can kill. Yeah, Orisha can kill if they're violated, if they feel offended, if people are trying to access them and use them in violation of their protocols in any way. Um, Orisha can actually absolutely take the lives of those who violate, but also the lives of those that you might consider loved ones or close to you. Thank you so much, Kiona, for your efforts in the chat and sharing our information, contact information. I appreciate that. We truly need and accept your offerings or donations by way of PayPal. Use my paypal.me/The Divine Prince. And of course, I'm always open to your questions, comments, and requests. Personal questions, comments, and requests by way of email at divineprince@houseofthedivineprince.com or by way of my website at www.houseofthedivineprince.com. Some of you are trying to use my services list as sort of a shopping cart, if you will. And it's really not set up that way. Some of the information is not correct on it because of some technical stuff that's going on with many of the sites right now with their lack of employees to sort of service some things. Like all of my comments are not showing up on my Google business page right now because of the coronavirus. So always send a direct request to me or use the contact form in my website to send your direct question and a request to me. And then I'll give you the specific details, the specific answer, the specific requirements to meet whatever the service and or request is that you might seek from me. All is indeed a blessing. Am I missing my questions, my comments? Oh, I see one. Kimberly McTall. Do I have to be initiated to begin voodoo, or can one be self-taught? There is no self-taught voodoo, hoodoo, conjure, root work, or band, period. There just isn't. And I compared that to chemistry. I compared that to medicine. Let's think of something that we consider less benevolent. Eating. Eating. We all can eat. We all have the right to eat. We all have the need and the right to, as human beings, to have food and to have nourishment. We all have the freedom and the access to the grocery store, but everybody can't cook. Everybody can't cook, okay? And you might have a house full of recipe books, which used to be popular back in the day before the internet. Now we have, internet sources. I have some that email recipes right to your mailbox every day. That don't make you Chef Ramsay. That don't make you a B. Smith, okay? That does not make you a cook. And so one might say, well, I am self-taught and I did learn how to bake and I did learn how to prepare, certain meals. But you did a lot of study. You did a lot of research. You did a lot of practice. You messed up a lot of food. Or you sat at the foot of Big Mama and Auntie so-and-so and maybe your dad, might be the best cook in your family. Maybe your uncle might be the best chef in your family. You might have grew up in the house with Leah Chase, okay? But that don't necessarily make you the best cook if that's not where your passion is, or if that's not where your skill set is, if that's not where your innate abilities might be. And then even the best cooks, the best self-made cooks are then going to educate themselves by listening to and following and taking in many a YouTube video of some of the best cooks in the world. So I compare it to that. I compare it to that. There's no self-initiation. There's no self-taught with voodoo. You might as well be doing witchcraft. You might as well be doing black magic, which even that has rules to it. Even that has protocols to it. Even demonology and Satanism has rules to it, or you can absolutely harm yourself. So it's just like cooking. You wouldn't let your kids around the stove before they were old enough, before they were mature enough, before they were ready enough, before they could really read and dissect a recipe and know how to use a measuring cup, know how to a difference between a teaspoon and a tablespoon and etc. So there's no self-taught. There really isn't. And in the best case scenario, even in Haiti, even in Benin, even in Nigeria, even in Ghana, even in Mississippi, even in Louisiana, even in Missouri, you're going to grow up with parents who are doing this regularly, connecting with others who are doing this regularly. Um, and so their skill set, my skill set is not contingent on me being self-taught. I've not only read a lot of books and studied a lot of books, but I've also sat under a lot of people and humbled myself to a lot of people. So there is no self-taught, beloved. Hoodoo occultism is asking why Haitians are not open to use Black people in America. Um, for some of what I'm talking about right now, many Haitians are more likely to more likely to grow up in it, just like we grow up in the church. Many of us, we know what church look like. We know what a church service is made from. We know the typical itinerary that should be anticipated, even if you're visiting somebody else's church. Now, so when you start crossing denominations, things get a little different. Now, you might not jump up and say hallelujah at the Methodist church. You might not speak in tongue at the quote unquote Baptist church. So there are going to be lineage-based differences, even in Haiti, for instance. So my family, my bloodline, my lineage, my community did things a certain way. And then there's the trust factor, with not just Haitians, but ethnic groups outside the country. Haitians are no different, really, in many ways than Hondurans or Panamanians or Puerto Ricans or Dominicans, or Brazilians. Haitians are not that different, no more than we would be if we were then brought to a foreign country. If you took a Black American to Brazil, you're going to gravitate to other Americans. You're going to gravitate to other African Americans. You're going to gravitate to other Brazilians who identify with your position as an African American, who identify with your experience. So Haitians aren't a whole lot different than that. Nigerians aren't a whole lot different than that. The initiation that African Americans are receiving by going to a Sogbo, for instance, it's not what you would get if you were born in a Sogbo, or if you had been going to a Sogbo every year religiously for a decade. You're absolutely going to have a more of a relationship. When I try and use common words, I say relationship building. People in the West don't know how to build relationships. I don't care if you're Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, rich or poor, especially if you got gadgets, cell phones, tablets, if you're on the internet, your social skills have been tainted just by Western culture itself. And so we expect things too quick, we expect things too easy, we expect things without any commitment. And sometimes commitment is just, hell, what is your name? Man, some of these profiles and these names, I mean, it might as well not be any name. It might as well not be any face. And in many cases, there is no face, there is no details. It's a pretty flower or a tree or a car, some image. And then the name is none your business. The details is none of your damn business. you know. So, but we expect to connect. We expect to socialize. So some of you want to socialize in that environment, in that no-name environment, with a robot, with an algorithm that don't require no name, that don't require to know your language or your location, you know, or your picadillos as a particular person, you know. So I don't think Haitians in particular are any different than any other ethnic group. But Haitians often understand the value of voodoo from a cultural, ethno-touristic perspective. That's their goal, is voodoo. They know you're coming to Haiti for their voodoo. They know you don't give a damn about their poverty. They know you don't give a damn about their lack of access to clean water, you know, or some of the things that we in the States take for granted. So, yeah, they're not going to just, why would they give it to you? Well, if they give it to you, give it away, give it to you for free. We won't respect it in the West. And two, what then do we need Haiti for? Listen, Haiti, one of the poorest nations in the Western Hemisphere. And even when we look at North America, South America, Haiti is real low. And so their tourism, just like Oshogbo needs their tourism, just like Thailand needs their tourism, just like China needs their tourism, these regions that might be economically challenged are absolutely willing to take your money. And I'm not saying for bad purposes, I'm not saying for ill motivations, but you want to come to my country and see me sing and dance and perform and give you a 5-minute voodoo experience. We can't judge the Haitians for that. We can't judge the Haitians for that. And when they look at through the crystal ball, the social media, just like I do, and they see how you all are using this knowledge, using this symbolism, using this imagery, no, they ain't about to give it to you. Why? Does that not make sense? Hoodoo occultism? Why? Why would they be ready to just give it away? Why would they be ready to say, oh, my brother, you are my brother, you are my cousin, you are my sister. We come from same grandma, grandfather, same roots. Please take all of my secrets, take all of my jewels, take all of my precious power and knowledge, much as already been done in many of these parts of the world. You know, the resources that come up out of the land, the wood, the minerals, the oil, you know, in some cases, the very soil itself. Why would they give it away? And that's just on the American Western material level. Spiritually, why would you give something away that's of value only to have it be sullied? Young man, young woman, why would you give up your goods? The punani and the power stick. Do you know the power of the black penis? But we, you know, you don't think about that when you at the club. But now we want these cultures and these traditions to just give up their secrets to the Western world after we've seen what they've done with peyote, after we've seen what they've done with other substances and other cultural traditions and nuances. We now become the modern day colonizers. We now become the modern day missionaries, people of color. Because now you have the boat and the ship and the money and the plane and the passport, just like our former oppressors, to then now travel and oppress too. We all know a brother that loves to go and document voodoo in West Africa. And it's been some years now he's been doing this. I'm not calling any names. Some of y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so what has he done with that information? And how much of those West African secrets can we see demonstrated through him. Because like the Haitians in Hoodoo occultism question, they're not readily giving that to you for no amount of money. You got to, I know some people, Baba Luther, go to Africa every year, sometimes a couple times a year. It's building relationship with Ghanaians. It's building relationships with Nigerians. And because of that, we now have a relationship with Oshobo, Nigeria, New Orleans. We now have a relationship with Araba, El Baboon. Because of that, we have to be willing to build relationship. I see you in Badu. I see you in Facebook. I see you in Instagram. I see you in Twitter. I see how some of you act here. You have no relationship building skills at all. You have no problem sitting and watching me for 3 hours without communicating, without talking, without asking a question, without being a part of the give and take. So why would Haiti? Why would Nigeria? Why would South Africa give away these traditions to us just because we're their long lost enslaved descendant, whose mind might not even be right after having come through enslavement? So there are many answers to that. There are many answers to why.
May I say something?
Absolutely.
So Voodoo occultism asked the questions, do you feel like the Latina communities are culture vultures in the ATR traditions? And I wanted to chime in because we had went back and forth a couple of times in the chat. I don't think so.
No.
Because he says, I really think I honestly think because of in their version, they've kept it alive because many of us didn't know about our traditions because it was taken from us.
Many of you would not know Orisha if it weren't for the Hispanic community. Many of you would know nothing about Orisha if it weren't for the Cubans and the Puerto Ricans. Now, let's be fair. We have to look at slavery, beloved. So there was a relationship between the Vatican, between the Catholic Church, and Cuba, and ultimately the Hispanic Empire, the Spanish Empire, that allowed the enslavement of Africans to keep their traditions because they found that it kept us at peace. It kept us more willing to stay present and do the work as long as we took on Catholicism. So that's how the synchronizing and the amalgamation originally began, whether we're talking about Lukumi, Santeria, Voodoo, Palo, anything that's Western now, that's manifest on this side of the ocean, Maria Leonza, from the top to the bottom. We were unique in that we didn't have mountainous regions to escape to. We only had the swamps here in the south really to escape to, or the north to escape to. But there was nowhere where we could set up camp outright in the open and practice these traditions in a way that the Hispanic community had the availability. And not just the Hispanic community, the Portuguese community. Remember now, it's more slaves in Brazil than anywhere. More slaves went through Brazil than through the US, than through North America. So we also see through Candomblé the maintenance of these traditions. If it weren't for them, we might not have it here. We might only have that root work conjure as convoluted as it shows up to people. That might all be all that we would have. And we would now be doing this work to piece back to the Yoruba, the Khan, and the Fan, and etc. If it weren't not only for the Hispanic community, but also for our artisans, our Catherine Dunham, great dancers, Chuck Davis, another great dancer, who not only taught Black dance, Black culture, African culture, but made sure that we were connected to the language, the drum rhythms, the beats, etc. So no, I don't see them as culture vultures. I don't. Where I do see the problem is Just like the question was suggested about the Haitians. We can't force them to be open to African Americans if African Americans aren't open to Hispanic culture, to Latin culture, to the other aspects of who they are as a people. Now, I haven't had a whole lot of problems with Hispanic community. I use Google Translate. I've studied Spanish 101, 102. I have a little bit of mobility in not just the language, but the culture and the tradition. So I haven't found a whole lot, but I have found when we get in these spaces, especially back in the day, Ning, NING, Facebook, MySpace, Yahoo 360, it was always about an argument and a debate, because they're coming from the perspective of we are descendants of the Middle Passage too. We have the Middle Passage blood link in us too. And we have maintained the culture up until the 70s, well, really the 80s, the 90s, when now the African American community is getting in on it, primarily through the internet. And they're seeing what I see, it being come at incorrectly, it being come at improperly, it being taught or demonstrated from no real tangible space. So that's when I saw ego rise up in social media in terms of how we interact, the Hispanic community and the Black community as it relates to ATR. And they're saying, look, I've been doing this since birth. My grandmama did this. My great granddaddy did this. Now you all are just now getting woke, just now getting on board, just now want to experience your Orisha romance, and y'all want to be Babalas, Ianifas, magical practitioners, witches, which ain't even proper, overnight in the tradition. So yeah, they would feel offended. They would feel bruised. They have developed a relationship directly with West Africa. I know some West Africans who are posting in Spanish. They are posting in Portuguese, because those communities have already shown a commitment, a cross-cultural commitment to those cultures, not just the religion of Ifa, not just Yoruba. We are still struggling to do that. Still struggling to do that. Even when we see African Americans marrying West Africans, the lifestyle that they typically mirror back to us is Christian and Western. They go to church, they got great jobs, great houses, live in the suburbs. We're not seeing Ifa mirrored back through them. We're not seeing a Khan mirrored back through them. So it looks like Hispanic dominance, to some degree. It looks like, and that's an illusion. My Botanica is owned by Hispanics. Speak very little English at all. I have to use Google Translate. I have to work it out. But so are they. So are they. The woman will call me and she's using her best English. We've both gotten beyond apologizing for not speaking grammatically correct, but she makes an effort to speak English. I make an effort to speak Spanish, and we come together and we have a great relationship. I need them in order to do my initiations. I need them in order to have the supplies that I need to continue to do ancestral work and divination with people. So I don't see them as culture vultures. There are other communities that we can look at, but I wouldn't say necessarily the Hispanic community. Kiona, help me out. What was the next question?
I think that was it. Let me go back because I got stuck on Kimberly McCall wanted to know when you're gonna bless us with the book.
I really need help. I'm just being honest. I'm the first to say a closed mouth does not get fed. And every few years or so, I think I have help. I most recently thought I had help last year, the fall of last year. Things started off well in terms of conversation. We were all gung ho. And then the work, I think, got overwhelming. My life got overwhelming. Life itself was in motion for both of us. And so the work never got done. I got some of my other legalities, commitments, and contracts in place. And I'm very thankful for Beloved for her assistance in that regard. I'm legal. I'm on the books. My brand is legitimate. My trademarks are legitimate. My copyrights are legitimate. So y'all can play with me if you want to. Hoodoo Central LLC. But in terms of my book, I don't know if I need a ghostwriter. I don't know if I need an administrator who handles that, and maybe they gift me certain assignments that I can handle in bites while they take that and then construct, the context of a book. I don't know. I just can't figure out how to do it now and live life on life's terms the way my life is right now. Some of you got a little bit of a downtime by Corona. Corona has actually affected my schedule doublefold. I'm more busy now than I was even before Corona. So I don't know how I'm going to figure out how to get my books completed, at least get one completed, so that I can get it out in any reasonable time frame. But I'm certainly working on it. That was a bit of a request for help. If there's anybody in the room that has ever really legitimately written a book, and kind of knows how that process goes, or is willing to sort of work that out for me and with me, I'm open to that. Guinevere Reed says we need to embrace, educate, and become more enlightened about the continuity of our African diaspora spirituality. Americans, Hoodoos, even if it's diluted, we are especially urban and globally connected. And I agree at every level. I often say, if you have an internet, if you got a computer and you pay an internet bill every month, and you don't have any friends in other countries, in these ethnic countries, what you got internet for, other than Candy Crush and foolishness? What you got internet for? If you aren't using your Skype, your WhatsApp to communicate with Africans and in the diaspora, why do you have internet? I do every day. And you learn how to navigate the dog piles, you learn how to navigate the regular things in life that we all navigate through wherever we are in the world. They're navigating it too. They're just as fearful too. They're just as miseducated about who we are as well. They don't know as much about blacks in America as we think they should know about blacks in America. They don't know much about slavery as we think they should know about slavery. Become the Sea is asking to speak regarding repairing divisions between colonized indigenous communities and ATR. Beloved, that's kind of what I'm speaking to now. We've got too much technology and too much resources available to us beyond just money that we could be using to reconnect, not just across the diaspora and in indigenous communities, but within our own families. I mean, we got cousins, nieces, nephews, brothers, sisters, uncles, aunts that we don't hear anything from, that we don't reach out to, that there's no connection there with. So that's why I say Become the Sea. It's a Western problem. It's a symptom of a Western disease that affects our ability to build relationships, to connect, to get to know, to build, in a very natural and organic way. There's that trust element, Hoodoo occultism, sort of introduced with the Haitian question and comment. There's the racial element. Hoodoo occultism is talking about the light-skinned Latina. It's like the mulattoes in the U.S. To some degree, yes. To some degree, there are Hispanics who are colorized, just like blacks. But if I could get you all to stop, we say Hispanic because they speak Spanish. These are really multiracial people that are either primarily indigenous, mixed with Black, African, and Spaniards, or they are primarily Spaniard and indigenous, and in some cases mixed with a little bit Black African. And they are not as knowledgeable about their bloodline lineage as we are. DNA tests are new to everybody. DNA tests are new to the planet. There is a Black presence in Mexico, absolutely. Absolutely. We've talked about that on previous shows. Give me your questions, your comments. Please type them in all capital letters so that Kiona can help me.
I have a comment. We're oftentimes quick to pull the prejudice and race card, which does exist. But if we can focus more on our roots, which is what you come here and you preach until you're blue in the face every single day, then we will be okay. I've lived in Texas and now I'm in California. And when I see root work, I've sat in a congregation where people speaking nothing but Spanish, and they were open to me. So everyone, we're even prejudiced and have racism amongst each other. Mm-hmm. So let's get past that and let's get to the root work. The problem is we're fighting against energies that we don't know anything about. We're fighting against energies that we aren't familiar with. We're coming to energies asking them for help when we haven't even gone to our ancestors, me included. So let's get beyond the color of the skin. And if someone of Latino descent can help you, then ask them. Ask them to help you. If someone, what was the other one that we were talking about? Of African, the diaspora, ask them. Because you won't know if they won't help you unless you ask. But you can't just assume because you look at them, then they won't help you.
I'm quick to ask questions. And often I find they don't know. They believe what most of the world believes about white America. And they superimpose that on people of color who are American. So you will run into the Nigerian, the Ghanaian, the Brazilian, who, within the first sentence, can you help me out? Can you do me a favor? Can you buy me airtime? Can you keep me minutes on my phone? You will get that. There are those who do that. And, if you're in need and you not have access to this superhighway, you cannot entirely fault them for making the attempt. But once you say, no, boo, that ain't me, we're not about to do that. Who are you? Where do you live? What's your religion? What do you do on Saturday night? Where do you go in your community where culture is being talked about? That's what I ask. Now, that person, Black, white, American, or any other ethnicity, is either going to contribute to that conversation, just like what's going on right here, or they're going to sit and look at me, just like what's going on right here, and just hear what I have to say and either not respond or eventually, poof, they gone. So there's no real danger. You ain't giving them your credit card number. You ain't giving them access to your bank account unless you're a fool. You're not doing that. But just like I said, we don't know how to build relationship in the West. We don't know how to build relationship. We don't know how to walk up to someone anew and say, hi, my name is. How you doing? Where you from? That's an interesting background. That's an interesting look. Who are those people in the picture behind your head? Where'd that stick come from? We ask questions. But many of us ain't willing to answer questions. And see, that's the problem. You can't ask questions you're not willing to answer for yourself. So, I appreciate Keisha Smith and Kiona D. Carter and people who are using their name. And I don't have a problem with I'm shy or weird mafia. I get that too. But when we're talking about building what Hoodoo cultism talked about, or was it somebody else? somebody said about building cross-cultural relationships. It was becoming the sea. Divisions between colonized indigenous communities and ATR. These divisions are created by language, culture, geographic location, experience. The life my friends live in Sao Paulo, Brazil is nothing we could even understand in New Orleans. Completely different. There are things that make us all human, that we all have similarities. But until you start asking questions, you don't know how much water is available. You don't know how much internet is available. One of the first questions I ask is, how are you accessing the internet? Especially if I'm talking to someone in Africa. Are you at the cafe? That's a code word. As soon as I say cafe, they know I already know the game. They know I already know about people sitting up in the cafes in Nigeria, creating, fake relationship with people in order to get access to your resources. That ends it right there, becoming the sea. That ends it. And so either they are really looking to talk about something, or they really need your help. And I find in a lot of cases they really need help. They really need help. And sometimes it's just being present, just like here, sharing information, telling them what's available. It was through communicating with Nigerians that I found out that they didn't have no PayPal in Nigeria. I didn't know that. So it's a reason that they are apt to use Cash App in Nigeria. It's a reason that are apt to use WhatsApp in Nigeria. The internet is heavily monitored in Nigeria. So they don't feel like they can speak their mind openly on Facebook, but they feel they can on WhatsApp. So it's all kind of reasons that people do what they do online. But if we don't bridge that gap, if we don't ask questions, we never know. We'll never understand. We never gain any real clarity. I think the poverty and the resource divide is a big deal, becoming the sea. Often, you get, can you put money in my books? Can you help me out? Can you pay my phone bill? Because they are living in really impoverished parts of the world. But again, they see TV, so they think we live just like the white folks they see on TV. So they think I have a car. They think I own my own house. They think I have a savings and a pension plan and a retirement fund. They think I have access to all that. Well, you in America. That also explains why sometimes, particularly Africans and African Americans, bump heads. Because those college degreed up Africans come here and look at us sometimes and say, why aren't you using all these resources that are available in America? And again, if they haven't been educated about slavery and white supremacy and how that worked, you can't expect them to know. You'd be shocked how many West Africans that I've asked the question directly, how much do you know about slavery? And the conversation go quiet. Well, what they teach y'all over there in school about slavery? Now that's how I learned that Nigerians can't talk about everything. Certain topics they will not talk about, period. Unless they, like you, radical, revolutionary, to some degree don't give a damn. And so I've met Nigerians that have broke it down to me. This is what's going on. This is what's happening. This is why. But then they're using, assumed identities. They're covering their trail. They're using WhatsApp. They're a little bit more crafty. So I think the opportunity becomes the seed for us to get beyond colonized indigenous mindsets. Is greater now.
And we really should. Just like Hoodoo occultism, he's saying that it's that if you don't look like him, then you can't teach him about the ATR culture. And I've got to call a thing a thing. Maybe that's the issue characteristics popping up in me. Yes, you can. Because even if you go to Africa, the majority of the continent is they're Christian.
Or Muslim.
And if you mention anything about ATR, they're going to judge you. They're going to look at you as being negative and having dark energies and black magic. So exposure is everything.
I find them also.
Exposure is everything.
I also find them to be. I want to add to that, Kiona. I also find them to be as racially and skin shade. What's the word I'm looking for? Colorism. It's just as big a deal in West Africa as it is here. To some degree, I would say even more so. Skin bleaching products ain't a major market in the U.S. Oh, you can go to the store and get it, but you go to Nigeria, Ghana, it's everywhere. It's on every shelf. So the racism that you believe you're battling, hoodoo occultism, they're battling it too. And the same lies and manipulation they do here, they did over there. So I hear you say, well, they got to look like me. Well, I've met a lot of people who look like me who knew nothing about voodoo. I've met people in Nigeria who know nothing about Ifa. Nothing. Nothing. I write Shango, what's that? I write Oshun, what's that word? Know nothing. And Nigeria's national language is English. So you have Nigerians that don't speak old Yoruba because the Yoruba we're using to connect ATR is not conversational modern day Yoruba. And so they don't even understand it. They don't even know what I'm talking about. It's also a sort of a repercussion of that idea that all Africa is the same, which was, originally implanted on us. They all Black, they all African, they all the same. But, depending on their ethnic group, depending on their geographic location, and you make some Black African reference to something that's outside their realm of awareness, they look at you just like any uneducated Black American would. They look at you just like any white person would. And I've had them ask me, what's that? What does that mean? And I've had to explain it to them. And I've had, oh yeah, my grandmother used to talk about that. My auntie, just like here. So be careful with that hoodoo occultism. Also, that whole bleaching shade thing, when I lived in Pasadena, California back in the 90s, there was a Nigerian, Igbo Nigerian in our building. I mean, he was lighter than Barack Obama. He was like 6'3", 6'4", tall, lanky, guy, very fair skin. And he taught me attitudes and aspects of racism that existed in Africa and Nigeria that just blew my mind. I just had no idea. The albinos, who are being kidnapped, killed, mutilated, slaughtered, primarily for voodoo, by the way. People believe that their body parts can be thusly used in voodoo. But if you take just one country, Nigeria, that they got every shade in that country, every shade. And so if you took the time to figure out who was Nigerian, of what ethnicity, who had some Middle Eastern in them, who had some, you would be just as limited there in moving this Black conscious thing forward as we find ourselves to be here. So the mythologies that you're speaking to, that you're suggesting comes from Blacks. Which Blacks? Which Blacks? And the Yoruba have not always even been where they are, have not always even been in Nigeria. So we've got to, Kiona suggested it, we've got to grow up and stop looking at race from this Black American post-slavery perspective and take on what Becoming Deceased said, a more diverse, international, global, and I dare say cosmic perspective. Because once we get to a certain development in our growth, we got to get off the ground. Some of us, particularly those who watch Ancient Aliens and listen to Coast, we are already in the universe. We're in the cosmos. We've already transcended just the little earth conflict of race and color and ethnicity.
But doing better than hoodoo occultism doesn't mean material. We have to get beyond the carnal mentality. Because when you go to the county building, if you ever stop out there, you don't see that many Latino people in there applying for welfare. You will see them living a whole bunch to a house, everybody working jobs and nobody else want to work. They work their fingers to the bone and they drive what they drive. You might see a guy, he might look regular, and the shoes on his feet might be $800 to $1,000. So let's get beyond the carnal and the material. Who is getting work? Who is getting results? Let's do that because there's people out here that are really hurting. People out here that really need healing. So if somebody that can help you, just like somebody might say, "Oh, a Caucasian person don't look like me," but they got work too. You can't say that. They can put some fire on you too. So I'm not saying you go to them. I'm saying they got work too. They can put fire on you too. Let's get beyond the carnal mindset and let's get results.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, all they have to do is pull back. All they have to do is pull back. They already have a relationship with Nigeria. They already have a relationship with Ghana and South Africa and many other ethnic regions of the west coast of Africa, by the way. The Congo, their houses are divided by ethnic tradition in both Brazil and in Cuba. Until we get to the place that we can do that, I'm beyond complaining because it's pointless to complain. It's an ongoing conversation. It makes for great shows sometimes, but we aren't moving forward in terms of who's doing the work. I see what you're saying, Keisha. Now, I agree with hoodoo occultism that if I'm going to do voodoo, if I'm going to do Ifa, I'm going to the people of that bloodline, of that lineage. It goes back to an earlier question about, I can't remember what the question was right now, but it goes back to the question about voodoo and Orishas doing harm to people, Orishas blocking people. Now I got a big problem with Yoruba Ifa being an open market to everybody on the planet, including Europeans who have no Yoruba background at all, who have no West African background at all. So no, I'm going to go to the people who are operating in a system that's within their lineage to do. So I guess I'm in between you and hoodoo occultism on that particular nuance. I'm grateful for each and every one of you and your active participation and your questions. Everybody's active right now. Everybody has something to say right now. I should have been on the phone like Kiona so I could hear your voice and your opinion and your tone. Often how we say things has everything to do with how we understand.
Yeah, and so with hoodoo occultism, I'm gonna fall back because his energy for me, and I wish he was on the line. His energy, and he may have a valid point, but because his words and I can't feel the energy, it's not coming across well for me. Because it's coming off is negative, and it's like he's absolute, and it's not hearing what anyone else has to say. There's a big world out here, and we can't just go from what we see and then our zip code and just say that's the world as it is. Mm-hmm. Because it's a huge world out here. And from what my exposure and my experience may be different. So it's okay to disagree. It's okay to have a healthy debate. But just to say, Kiana, heal from what? What I mean, let's heal. Let's heal because I'm not the only person. I'm the only one that will be transparent. I'm the only one that will show my naked behind on here because I'm looking for true help because I know this is the house to get it in. However, it's almost 30 people on here. You can't tell me I'm the only one that got problems.
Yeah, yeah. And I like where Genevieve Reeves says, black on black racism, colorism, tribalism, self-hate is absolutely real. However, the first step to healing the divide is to identify, acknowledge, and recognize what we have in common, other than just our differences. And I agree. In my mid 50s, and when I look back over the course of my life, the greatest degree of racism, colorism, prejudice, bias that I experienced was in my community and from Black people until this very day. To this very day. Black people ain't all that interested in befriending me. Black people ain't all that interested in getting to know me. Black people ain't all that interested in making any kind of sense of my lifestyle and how I'm navigating in the world unless I'm beneficial or useful to them. And that's it. Fix my life. Give me a reading. Provide a service. But that's it. That's it. I can count on two hands how many people really give a damn. I can count on two hands how many people care if I got toilet paper over here or not, if I'm eating every day or not, if I'm getting sleep every day or not. And when I look at opposition on work sites, work environment, opportunities, to get the blessing, to get the opportunity, the gatekeeper in my life has been Black. The gatekeeper in my life has been the Black Christian, the Black Muslim, the Black homophobe, the Black sexist, the Black Republican, the Black DL download perpetrating ass Negro. That's where all of the racism and prejudice and colorism and tribalism, for the most part, that I have had to encounter. I've rarely had an overt moment with a white person or Hispanic person about race or prejudice. Rarely. I've had some, and it's implied, or it might show up in customer service and you have to ask for the supervisor, or something of that regard. But in terms of that hardcore wall that I have to hit every day as a gay Black man, it's from Black people. It's from Black people. So you listen. I hear you. Like Keona, I wish you were on the phone. I know you're at work and could have shared.
And I don't understand why people. Always want to talk about Latinos and other communities, but then when they found out they got a whole bunch of Africans in their bloodline, then they want to scream, "Oh, what about the Indians?" Well, what about them? So it's like you can't say that you don't want to be exposed to one ethnicity, but then when you get your DNA test and you see that you are of African descent, then you want to sit there and say, "Oh, well, what about the Indians? And what about them? Because they're not showing up in your bloodline." So it's like, don't be disrespectful and not hear nobody out. With at the same time, people are hearing you. Be open and be honest. This is a whole world out here.
Yeah, the chat is moving so fast. I'm not even sure how the energy got to this place with y'all in the conversation. I'm just not. I'm not getting that.
He said he disagrees, and I'm the type of person I can disagree. Because if you have an opinion, I have an opinion. It's okay. But he says that I disagree with you, and he just went too far. So I said, you know what, I'm gonna fall back because your energy is not coming across well for me. But then he says, oh, I don't know what my energy is doing to you. I'm not here to satisfy you. And I'm like, no, you're going too far at this point because now you're trying to make it personal. Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.
Yeah, we just lost Blog Talk Radio, but we've been talking for 3 hours. Hoodoo occultism, I want to agree with you, but it's your presentation. And it's the words that you're using right now. I'm not worried about anybody else. That's why I can't get no love from black people. Black people are not worried about anybody else but themselves. But themselves. It's real easy to say, I'm concerned about the needs of other black people. That's real easy to say. That's not as easy to demonstrate, to put into demonstration. Because where I'm sitting, I don't get that. I don't get no black love. You want to go there? Let's go there. I don't get no black love for doing this. My godchildren make sure I'm okay. My clients make sure I'm okay. Sometimes they are of other ethnicities. But if I were to look to black people, y'all don't give a damn whether I live or die. You don't give a damn if I live or die. My phone don't ring socially. My phone rings for business. Can you help me? Can you fix it? Can you repair it? Can you teach me something I can use to control my world? And that's not even why I teach Voodoo. I teach Voodoo so that we do come together as a community, not so that everybody in this room can be individually empowered as some great witch unto their own power. So you and I are in agreement, Hoodoo occultism. My problem is the demonstration. And the language that you're using, I'm familiar with, because we get those in the black conscious, red, black, and green, red, gold, and green rooms all the time. And I can count on one hand how many of those black revolutionary voices even acknowledge me, even recognize me, even have anything to say to me. You know, I have some that live right here in this town, spoken word artists, masterful poets, well-known black revolutionary. You know, I can take photographs with them and post it to my Instagram, but they don't follow me. They don't acknowledge me. So I mean, come on now. I'm gonna tell my truth. My truth. That's one of the reasons I cut my dreadlocks, because it's a fashion now. Ain't no culture in dreads anymore. Ain't no unity in dreads anymore. Ain't no we got something in common, let's come together in dreads anymore. It's now a fashion statement. And if I can get my dreads to look better than the next person's dreads, then that's really the extent. If I can get my dreads longer than the next person's dreads, that's really the extent of where that goes today. It has no reminiscence whatsoever of what it was in the 60s and the 70s, when it was about culture, when it was about grassroots, when it was about coming together. I'm trying not to get emotional, but between you and Kiona, y'all taking me there right now, because I see both positions. But I'm telling you, Hoodoo occultism, all that revolutionary black talk, can we all come together? I'm not seeing that in demonstration. I'm not seeing that happen in people's demonstration at all, at all. And you can't point me to a group, an organization, a location in this country where that's happening at, because I would be living there. Because I would be living there. That's my story. I moved to where the black was. I moved to where the culture was. That's how I got to New Orleans. This is the most African city in America. This is the most northern, most Caribbean cultural, Virgin Island cultural representative in the Western Hemisphere, New Orleans. But even in New Orleans, I don't get no rewards for representing Voodoo. I don't get no respect for representing Voodoo from black people. I get it from white people. If it weren't for white people, I wouldn't be filmed. If it weren't for Hispanic people, I wouldn't be filmed. If it weren't for Asian people, I wouldn't be on film. I wouldn't be acknowledged, because black people aren't going to do it. Or they're only going to do it for themselves, or they're only going to do it for themselves in a way that don't reflect sort of this conscious mindset that you all are trying to project right now in the group. Okay? So being black now is a fashion statement. Rachel Dolezal pulled it off. Being black now is a fashion statement. If it's not showing up in the demonstration, if it's not showing up where the love is, if it's not showing up where we put our money, then I can't ride with that. You and I, beloved, ain't got no issue. Hoodoo occultism. It's the direction of this topic. It's the direction of this topic. If I eliminated every ethnic group, every racial representation beyond black, I would be dead right now. I would be starving right now. I would be homeless and on the street right now. If I only depended on people who look like me, black African people like me, I would be dead. I'd be dead. So I don't get it. You got me in my feelings. I don't get it. I know I have a big impact. What I'm saying is there's no reciprocity for it. There's no reciprocity for it. None. 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 I've been in my house since March 9th. March 9th. I had a white couple bring a box of produce to me. ATR. Fruits, vegetables, produce. I don't get the whole black conscious thing. I'm on the other side of that. Those who believe that, who are operating in that, they're doing it every day. And it ain't no argument. But when it shows up like in these rooms and in these podcasts, and it becomes, oh, so political and so Asata Shakur and so, those people not real. Those people are not real. The last real one I remember was the Truth Terrorist. And may she rest in heaven. That was the last real one that I can recall right now. She called me on the phone. She sent me mail. She communicated with me outside of podcasting how black we are. And listen, I know you and I have a relationship, and I know we move in that direction. But when you say black people, now it's dicey for me. I'm not here. That's not why I'm doing this. It's not why I'm doing this. I know that there are black people on the sound of my voice right now who are never going to let go of the hand of Jesus, and I'm okay with that. Just don't enforce Jesus on me. Just don't enforce Muhammad on me. I'm not here to change your mind, your vision, your view, the way you do things. Just don't oppress me. Just don't oppress me. Some of those same black conscious folk who do occultism don't even think I should be alive. So that's problematic for me. And I appreciate it. I'm doing the best that I can do. I'm doing what the ancestors would have me to do. I'm doing what I think is bringing some level of correction, if you will, to the problem. Not just complaining. I rarely get in my feelings. The last 5 minutes was my feelings. My feelings. I don't feel supported by black people for doing this. Not at all. I'm documented now at the academic level for representing voodoo, primarily because of the interests of white scholars, not black people. I would love to say it was black people. I would love to say that, Essence and Jet Magazine and BET and the People's Coalition and Jesse Jackson, and I would love to say they were ringing my phone off the hook. They not. I would love to say black leaders are, in support of what I'm doing. I'm not seeing it. It's not manifesting. In fact, I'm seeing just the opposite. In any opportunity to cut a corner and to cut me off, or to silence me, or to lessen my gravity or lessen my reach, that's what I get from Black people. My mouth is all jacked up right now because I want to call names, but I'm not going to. I want to call names, but I'm not going to. I'm not going to. I'm going to maintain my position and my dignity right now. But I appreciate you. I look forward to working with you, beloved Hoodoo Occultism, and everyone else that's present in the room. It's been a great show. Kiona and Hoodoo Occultism did a lot to make that happen. I appreciate you. No, I get no support. I get no love for the most part from Black people or the Black community. And that's not why I do what I do. I love Africa. I love people. And I most certainly love and acknowledge people who love and acknowledge me. But if we get down to it, that's not why. That's not why I do this. That community, those people, they don't reach out to me. They don't get it. They don't get it. I'm grateful for Charlemagne the God, and the opportunity that was given for Frita to introduce me, into the program. But I ain't heard from Charlemagne the God or anyone else who says they're representing Black people and African people and indigenous people, and that they understand the importance and the gravity of spirituality in religion, and healthy spirituality and religion in making that happen. I ain't heard from no Muslims, no Hebrew Israelites, no Dr. York people, no nothing, no nobody. I got a few Black Panther friends, both young and old, who totally get it, who totally support, on the private end. But I'm not seeing no Black rallying here. I'm not seeing no Black following here. It's not showing up in my numbers. It's not showing up in my ratings. And it's not showing up on the ground. They believe in Jesus because they were forced to. Jesus came with violence and abuse and death and enslavement and world domination and politics. It's hard for some people just in fear to turn away from that. It's hard for people just in the fear. The fear of hell is man, the fear of hell is great. I have friends, family, and clients. The fear of hell is great. And I'm talking about people who are long past the Bible, long past Christianity, who've read other books, who have a deeper understanding, and are still battling the fear of hate, the fear of hell. The fear of hell is great. Great. So that magic, that Black magic, is very powerful and deep for people to break free from and to overcome from. So I may very well be birthed in a new generation. I'm probably not going to see the respect or the gratitude or the reciprocity like many great people until long after I'm gone off the planet. But as you notice, it doesn't stop me. I keep moving forward. I keep doing what I'm meant to do. That is my satisfaction right now. That is my pleasure right now. All is a blessing. I'm going to have to move forward. All is a blessing. Until next time, I appreciate each and every one of you and your powerful contributions to the show. I'm going to introduce just a little bit of a new music right now. And I can't do that because Blog Talk Radio has ended. So let me do this. Let me see if I can pull up the song that I wanted to play on my browser so that you all in the YouTube Live can hear it. It's by Fulio. It's called Voodoo by Fulio. Voodoo by Fulio. All is a blessing. Greetings and salutations. All is a blessing.
Yeah, shit.
Now it's a lot of profanity, but it's a good song.
My grandma do voodoo. Fuck it, now I'm playing with that one. We just talk the head off a goose. Sister living proof. You can't walk a mile in my shoe. You can't even hang with my crew. I'm just trying to get bigger. Staying independent, getting richer. I can't fall victim to the system. The Fulio a killer. Homies trying to knock me out the picture. I'm just trying to take care of my sister and provide for my brothers. If you play that cut, then I'm a cutter. I'm heartless, I never love you. Never been a buster. If you ain't from the seats, nigga, fuck it. If Kodak got a problem, I bust it. I've been thinking since the 6. That's why I ain't never had shit. Started no bad ass shit.
Yes, Keisha Smith, noon tomorrow, noon. U.S. Central Standard Time.
Nigga, nah, I do the bitch. Really on my beach if I flinch. In that dirty water like a fish. With Josie in the tent. Shut the nigga, why would I repent? Pull up on the truth, I was hit. I don't wanna get killed. But fuck it, bro, I'm really in the field. By my respect, to do 100 years. It is what it is. Everything gotta stay concealed. I'ma ride till it really ain't no will. And if I sign this deal, I'ma still ride with my steel. Never gave a fuck about a meal. Niggas hacking out the meal. God can't even feel how I feel. I can't even drill how I drill. Niggas hating my hood. I'm thinking that everything was good. Guessing I got shit misunderstood. Wish a nigga would. Refuse to be the nigga saying I could. I just wanna make it out the hood. My grandma do voodoo. Fuck it, now I'm playing with that woo. We just talk the head off a goose. Sister living proof. You can't walk a mile in my shoe. You can't even hang with my crew. My grandma do voodoo. Fuck it, now I'm playing with that woo. We just talk the head off a goose. Sister living proof. You can't walk a mile in my shoe. You can't even gang with my crew.
You gotta be here to get the pass.
Fuck it, love. My grandma do voodoo. Fuck it, now I'm playing with that woo. We just talk the head off a goose. Sister living proof. You can't walk a mile in my shoe. You can't even hang with my crew. I'm just trying to get bigger. Staying